It's time for the big one. The younger brother of Atlantis SquarePantis. And let me just tell you, it managed to exceed my expectations. It happened to be worse than Atlantis SquarePantis. I don't know how that's possible, but let's see how they did it. The first image we see to celebrate SpongeBob's 10-year anniversary is a demonic puppet from hell.
Are you ready, kids?
The creepy puppet is right though. You do need to be ready to sit through this mess.
Nautical nonsense be something you wear. Then drop on the deck and flop like a fish.
This intro tells us where the budget went. Insert celebrity cameo number 1, CeeLo Green, singing this redone intro. But honestly, it's the best part of this. Well, Wikipedia calls it a movie. And once again, this is why we don't use Wikipedia to make our reviews.
Hey, Wikipedia is a wealth of information, and lies. Mostly lies. Anyway, after the theme, we get a clip show of Patchy segments narrated by Ricky Gervais. This goes on for way too long and adds literally nothing.
And today, a mere 10 years later, obviously, 10 years ago I said that.
Thank you for restating that vital piece of information. Yes, as we've already stated, this was SpongeBob's 10-year anniversary special, and they pretty much forgot that fact before they even started production.
So then we get to the Patchy segment proper. Although, I can't actually call it a segment because, really, the focus of SpongeBob's big anniversary special is Patchy. You'll notice really fast that the people behind this show have no idea how to write, direct, or shoot something live action. But we'll get into more of that later. So before we even get to the SpongeBob stuff, which starts at 3 minutes in, Patchy shows up at the Nick Animation Studio. He demands to see SpongeBob. The guard tells him to wait, and then immediately lets him in and hands him a shrimp cocktail.
Ahoy!
Security, may I help you?
Yes, this is Patchy the Pirate for SpongeBob SquarePants. I sent him over 400 letters this week.
So, does he think that SpongeBob is actually real? If SpongeBob isn't real, then this is creepy because a grown man thinks that a cartoon character is real. If SpongeBob is real, then this is creepy because he sent him over 400 letters a week. I mean, take it to emulate your idol.
Hey, when will SpongeBob be here? Where is he, at lunch? An important meeting.
I'm not sure, sir.
Or getting his boat waxed?
Wait a minute. SpongeBob doesn't even have a license. Why would he have a boat? And since you've been the president of his fan club for a decade, you should know this! We haven't even begun, and there's already a plot hole.
Well, that's bad improv for you. A sure sign that they were making this garbage up as they went along.
So, the actual episode begins with the most pleasant sound in the world. 1,000,000 alarm clocks! This is apparently the 117th anniversary of the Krusty Krab. Keep in mind that Mr. Krabs opened the restaurant himself, and later is stated that Plankton has been trying to steal the recipe for that long.
Then we get a cutaway, for some reason. Did you ever want to see SpongeBob as a fetus? How about a pregnant Mrs. SquarePants? Well, here you go, all 2 people with that fetish. But seriously though, this is really weird and off-putting.
Especially since he tears out his umbilical cord to start eating the Krabby Patties directly. That can't be healthy.
I have heard doctors claim that you shouldn't eat Krabby Patties in your 3rd trimester. Maybe that's why SpongeBob turned out this way.
Ah, flashback! Anyway, we get our first song of the movie, and it's not that bad actually. Besides going on a bit too long and having next to nothing to do with the movie, it's actually pretty decent.
Yeah, too bad one of the most enjoyable things about this movie is stolen from the actual SpongeBob movie. Much like Best Day Ever, this song comes from the SpongeBob movie soundtrack, which means they put the least amount of effort into making the best part of this TV movie.
Speaking of the least amount of effort, we're back to the Patchy stuff. Time, 7 minutes. Patchy is tempted by his delusions of his pet bird, probably caused by the drug-infused shrimp, to look at a Rolodex full of celebrities, most of which the special is too cheap to afford.
Oh no, don't worry, they can afford the celebrities, but only if they cut tons of corners on everything else in this special.
Now we get the most shameless celebrity cameos that I have ever seen. Patchy uses this Rolodex to call up a bunch of celebrities that the promos promised would be in this movie. Considering this movie was made for kids apparently, how many of these celebrities would kids actually know?
Even I hardly recognize most of these people. Do you?
I recognize the Jonas Brothers at the top of the Rolodex.
In fairness, this was the best thing they were ever associated with. Actually, that might be too mean of a joke for the Jonas Brothers. By the way, don't remind us of a better SpongeBob special in the middle of a really dull part of your TV movie.
Patchy, president of the SpongeBob SquarePants fan club.
Ooh, your mother must be so proud. Patchy, maybe you should consider wearing 2 eye patches. That way you wouldn't be able to see what's become of your life.
What?
I'm not sure if he's talking to Patchy or Tom Kenny himself.
I'm sure it's a great script. 3, 2, 1. For me to poop on!
Kinda pointless to shit on shit.
Zing! If you'll allow me to go off on a tangent about something seemingly minor but is in fact a metaphor to how bad the Patchy Stuff really is, the Rolodex footage is looped, meaning that they either did not get enough footage to cover it all, or they thought it was actually a good effect, which it's not. What makes this worse is the fact that this was a pickup shot, meaning they went back and filmed it later. Know how I know? That is not Tom Kenny's arm. You'd be able to see the white ruffle, and it looks a little bit too feminine to be his. Also, the stuff on the desk completely changes. They actually went back and shot this and still didn't plan enough to get the right amount of footage. What's worse is that this short clip is played multiple times.
Finally, back to the SpongeBob stuff. He tries to get to the Krusty Krab, but is stopped by a line. He circumvents this obstacle by hopping on everyone's head, instead of maybe walking around them, or using the back door to the Krusty Krab. But that would be the reasonable option, now wouldn't it?
Mr. Krabs tells SpongeBob and Squidward that Plankton is likely to strike on this busy day, and gives some exposition that there is a network of tunnels running under the Krusty Krab, for some reason.
Except for the rest of the special, they're all above the restaurant. Either way, they are to study that map. Then we get a montage of Squidward sleeping. No, seriously.
What? I have never fallen asleep on duty.
Why would he say that? He knows he's a bad employee, and hell, half the time he's even proud of it.
When I first saw the lead into this, I was hoping for a montage of Squidward slacking on the job from older episodes. It would have been a clip show, but hey, if they added a ton of new content, it could have been a good clip show celebrating 10 years of SpongeBob. But no, this is literally a montage of new animation of Squidward sleeping. What a great use of animation.
And to help watch out for Plankton, I've hired some extra security.
Oh shit, we're all screwed. After Pat no pay, you want him in your restaurant again?
You hired Patrick? What, you expect me to spend money on a real security guard?
No, but I expect you to spend some money on the actual special, instead of bringing Plankton into the special and cutting to another montage of failure. It might have been clever if it wasn't entirely made out of sports jokes. It's not like variety is an important rule of comedy or anything. After Plankton decides that this would be a good day to steal the Krabby Patty formula, like every other day, we cut right back to the Rolodex.
Motherfucker.
Speaking of sports, we get a cameo by LeBron James, because this has so much to do with SpongeBob.
Wait a minute, I recognize him. He was on Gum.
But seriously, what does basketball have to do with SpongeBob?
What, you don't remember the episode where SpongeBob plays basketball?
Oh yeah, that was the episode after Squidward tried to commit suicide. I remember that now.
Who else is going to be performing?
Aren't you the modest one? Well, SpongeBob for one.
Oh, Tom Kenny, the voice of SpongeBob?
Who?
Get it? Because Tom Kenny plays Patchy. So, SpongeBob isn't real then. Why the fuck did they let him in?
Alright, kids at home, dress up like pirates and go swarm Nick's studios. Note, this will only work if the guard is poorly written.
The next cameo is Will Ferrell, being stalked by SpongeBob producers on his morning jog. Seriously.
You know, it's lazy to not have the cameos in the same room as our star, Patchy, but at least having them at their desk makes it look somewhat professional. Here, I'm pretty sure someone from SpongeBob ran into Will, took out their iPhone and possibly a gun, and bugged him until he said what they wanted him to.
Because I'm president of the SpongeBob fan club Tarzana chapter, and I'm throwing a TV show too, so...
Can I watch that instead, please?
No, but at least we're back to SpongeBob. Oh, yeah, and there's never been a gag about Mr. Krabs changing the prices. It feels like we're watching a bad remake of a ton of different episodes mashed together.
Speaking of bad episodes mashed together, another clip show! Then we have SpongeBob decorating the entire Krusty Krab with toilet paper and condiments. He put more time and money into the decor than the writers put into the special. Then we get a joke about Mr. Krabs being cheap. And then there's a joke about Squidward getting beat up. Besides the pointless Patchy crap, is there anything new here? Anything at all?
Nope, they make a clip show without any clips, and it still feels like a rehash. Speaking of which, the characters get locked in a freezer. What a lazy and overused way to start your plot.
Speaking of that, did you know this episode was called Stuck in the Freezer in Spain and Latin America? Let me tell you that that is a much better title than Truth or Square. What's that supposed to mean? The special is either going to be truthful to the advertisement or give you SpongeBob?
I have a theory on that Spanish name. They most likely gave up on the episode at the point of the freezer and assumed nothing could get more dull. But no, this isn't even the main plot.
So they get through the air ducts. Remember that they have a map of this place? They bring this up just to ignore it. Why? How is it funny to watch people wander around ventilation knowing that they have a map that they're too stupid to use?
Maybe it'll be an interesting character study where all the characters call each other out for bad behavior and learn something about each other. Not a chance.
Instead, we get a series of worse cutaway gags than Family Guy. Just like Atlantis SquarePantis, they're using alternate art styles to attempt to excuse their lack of effort. Anyway, this is a parody of a 50s cigarette commercials. Forget kids, I get the reference and I don't find it funny.
If they wanted to do a genuine throwback or parody, how about actually trying hand-drawn animation like they actually used to do back then? I'm pretty sure Adobe Flash didn't exist in the 50s.
So they crawl through some vents, reuse a joke from Wishing You Well, and come across Mr. Krabs spying on every person in Bikini Bottom.
Wait, what? Hang on a second.
Hired Patrick. What, you expect me to spend money on a real security guard?
Yeah, no money on extra security for the Krusty Krab, but he will install secret cameras in everyone's houses, including Sandy's bathroom, which costs a ton of money and nets him no obvious financial gain, his only motivation on the show, and put it all in a room that has no easy way to get in or out of? What? This is never even brought up again! Is he secretly selling pervy footage of the characters online? Where is the joke? What is the point? Ugh!
It's probably for Nickelodeon's latest reality show, Life in Bikini Bottom!
So Mr. Krabs is a bigwig at Nickelodeon, eh? That makes too much sense.
Children.
The children? I don't care about the children. I just care about their parents' money. The fact that their feeble minds are easily manipulated by cheap playgrounds and talentless clowns is no skin off my nose.
So Plankton enters the vents somehow, and then the group decides to split up. Mr. Krabs goes one way, alone, to presumably be lost forever. The others go the other way.
Oh, don't worry, Mr. Krabs pops back with the group later. But now more Patchy. And I am so sick of seeing this Rolodex. It is not a good transition, no matter how many times you use it.
This leads to nothing but more celebrity shit. They don't even use his real name because they know their target audience won't recognize him. MTV is less shameless about this stuff.
What is even the joke here? He went to pirate college? What, was this all made up on the spot that day based upon what celebrities actually agreed to do this nonsense?
So Patchy is trespassing on studio property, dressed like a pirate, thinks that a cartoon character is real, and is now laughing maniacally. This man is clearly unhealthy.
Oh, don't worry. The next thing he does is vaguely kidnap Robin Williams. But a worse crime than that is the terribly awkward improv that goes on between Patchy and Williams. Seriously, did the producers plan any of this? Or did they actually kidnap Robin Williams to do this?
I don't think this is acting on Robin Williams' part. It looks like he was just caught on the spot, and he's not even trying to be funny. If I didn't know any better, I'd think that this was some kind of hidden camera prank.
Wait a minute, I know this place. This is where careers come to die!
Do we even need to comment? The movie's making the jokes for us now.
When the actors have become self-aware that this is the worst thing in their career, there is no way this can get better. Also, how many shots of Robin and Patchy walking do we need to see? That's what really bugs me. So much of this garbage could have been edited down, but then we wouldn't have the marketable TV movie handle.
If they edit this down, it might have looked like a kidnapping. Oh wait, so we get the extravaganza, and we see the guest stars that Patchy actually managed not to kidnap, stalk, or harass. Anyone want to bet the writers of SpongeBob don't know who Abraham Lincoln really is? Oh, I'm sure it's great for her career to be alongside a puppet and a dead president.
She did the Kids' Choice Awards too. Maybe she owes Nick money.
Nobody cares. Without further...
Wow, look at how they treated one of the few celebrities that they actually got. I can only imagine how insulting this is to her. Speaking of insulting...
What do you mean he's not coming? Now I throw him a television extravaganza and he can't even be bothered to show up?
Well, maybe if you put some damn effort into this 10-year anniversary, he'd actually be bothered to show up. Anyway, we cut to all of the other guest stars. Apparently, this guy is supposed to be the 5th best ventriloquist in the world. Well, all but 4 must suck because he can't close his fucking mouth.
Did they even tell Pink she was going to be acting? Every word out of her mouth sounds bitter, like they lied to her and she just wants to get to the musical part.
Let's do some practicing.
Because all bands practice in well-shot music videos with already built-in special effects. Despite having nothing to do with anything, it's one of the better parts of the movie. Either way, Patchy goes looking for the actual SpongeBob. Then he gets eaten by a whale. Because, whale.
You know how Patchy just wants to see SpongeBob again? Me freaking too. This is his big celebration, and it's the episode that has the least to do with him or any of his friends. We don't even get Potty for most of this. It's just terrible effects and Patchy.
We finally cut back to Plankton, as he crashes into SpongeBob and semi-friends. Now, after all this bullshit, we finally get to what the commercials were talking about, and why this special is criticized so heavily. You know, besides all the other reasons.
Just to recap, this far in the SpongeBob parts of this, it's been awkward, clumsy, and pointless. Not the worst SpongeBob material, but far from enjoyable. Here's where it gets even worse.
At barely any prompting, SpongeBob starts telling Plankton about when he learned about the secret patty formula.
You see the look on Squid's face as they go to flashback? That just about says it all.
This scene was done specifically to turn this into a ratings trap. I mean, most of the other ratings traps like To SquarePants or Not To SquarePants, Best Day Ever, or even SpongeBob You're Fired, were just episodes that Nick hyped the hell out of. This episode was built specifically specifically so they could hype it. I know this because they do this multiple times, and each time it's in a flashback that has nothing to do with the plot.
My editing teacher always tells us that if it doesn't further your story, you should lose it. By that logic, 90% of this special would be gone.
So Mr. Krabs comes alive through the flashback just to toss Plankton out of the story for a while. He materializes out of nowhere right behind them. Yeah, for some reason Mr. Krabs is with them now. Like he has the ability to teleport through flashbacks.
No clever transitions either. Just one shot he isn't there, they cut to Plankton, and then they cut back and he is. At least make a joke out of it. What was the point of even splitting them up? A crappy cliffhanger?
And another cutaway. Squidward remembers the time before SpongeBob came to Bikini Bottom. Guess the joke.
Squidward is sad because he needs some excitement in his life?
No, that only happens in clever episodes like Squidville. Here, he's totally happy, even though Patrick still lives next to him. He still has to work at the Krusty Krab with someone who isn't Jim. He still has to worry about Squilliam, still has to put up with the people of Bikini Bottom, and still sucks at clarinet.
Hooray for having a totally static character with no emotional range.
You know what we haven't had in a while? A totally pointless flashback! These are more pointless than the songs in Atlanta Square Pantis. At least those move the characters and sort of further the plot.
At least they use the same realtor model from Opposite Day. Actually, that brings up something else. Why are some of the side or one-off characters not in this thing? Mrs. Puff has a tiny cameo. Mermaid and Barnacle Boy aren't in it. Squilliam isn't in it. The Flying Dutchman isn't in it. Why not just have the side and even one-off characters be outside in the mob? How hard would that have even been? Just throw a little visual fan service. It doesn't require much effort.
And we get an actually funny joke when Mr. Krabs throws his wallet out of one of the vents.
Yeah, it's actually amusing to see someone steal from Mr. Krabs.
We gotta get out of here now!
Great, then maybe we could actually get to the plot. Anyway, we learn that Patrick has borrowed, also known as stole, Sandy's walkie-talkie.
And as soon as he pulls it out, you know he's going to do something really dumb to foil this escape.
Sandy's trapped in that box!
The stupid one. He's stupid, right?
Now we get another pointless flashback about SpongeBob getting married to Sandy. Now this is one of the most infamous lies in the commercial because people actually do ship this couple. But nope, it happens to be nothing more than a play.
Even the way SpongeBob presents his flashback is a dirty lie. Why would he say it like that? Especially because Mr. Krabs and Patrick are in the flashback!
It's like he did that just to mess with Squidward. We cut back to Patchy, who is sad that his special was a failure. I'm not sure, but I think that might be a metaphor for something.
Patchy decides to show us the outtakes and backstory of SpongeBob. Rather than actually show us the interesting story of SpongeBob's real creation, we get some unfunny gags along with some bad acting, and a lame old-timey filter over it all.
Then they go replacing SpongeBob in the opening theme song with all of the other main characters. It wasn't funny the first time, it wasn't funny the second time, and the third one makes me revile in horror of what the Eugene Krabs show would be like.
I like it when Hans takes off Squid's pants. Don't take that the wrong way. But that one gag wasn't worth it for this stupid repetitive setup.
I said that Demolition Doofus wasn't self-parody. This is what happens when they try to do self-parody. They bring up the cliches and do absolutely nothing with them. And then they make it go on way too long. The song is nice, but like the others, it has nothing to do with anything.
If you thought the walk cycle in the Lost episode was bad, all of these SpongeBob bits thrown into the Patchy junk are that times infinity.
Patchy gets launched into the air back to the studio and gets knocked out. He finally gets to meet SpongeBob. This leads to nothing. No comedy, no in-depth character study, just bad effects.
Patchy's entire story arc in this TV movie was about meeting SpongeBob. This is what it leads to? TV movie or not, dream or not, technically speaking, this is the climax. What a load of barnacle.
No, it's just me, the guy in the penny.
And apparently the writers still don't know who Abraham Lincoln is. Apparently not even Abraham Lincoln knows who Abraham Lincoln is.
Then, I don't even know, man. Oh, look, SpongeBob. I mean, the segment is back. Everyone is about to give up, and Patrick writes his last words, I guess.
Then they decide the simplest solution is the easiest and bash their way out, making all this ventilation crap pointless. Also, I love how there are several freeze frames here. At least it's animated, so it's kinda hard to notice.
Well, at least they are respecting the vent's privacy while asserting their authority and breaking through anyway.
They finally get out of the vents, and because the crowd was too tired of waiting for the plot to start, they've all gone home.
We went through all of that for nothing?
Thank you for reaffirming this to the audience. Provided the writers didn't give up a long time ago, they finally kicked the bucket here. Out of bullshit to throw the audience, they decided to fill up the runtime with A Christmas Carol.
What? Why? When? Where? How? I don't even understand this. It's all over after this, right?
Nope, we gotta bring back Plankton, who had the entire restaurant to himself for the past hour or so.
Oh yeah, of all the plot threads, this needed some finality.
It's the only thing in this whole piece of shit that had any closure whatsoever. Instead of finishing off the other other plots, we get Ricky Gervais recapping what we already saw.
At least there's some variety to their laziness here. We get stock pirate images, stock footage, and clips from the episode we just watched. Then just Ricky Gervais stumbling about, probably without a script.
We'll see you at the 20th anniversary. It's 10 years from now. Starting now.
Where we'll do this crap twice as bad with half as much money. How long do we got anyway?
I'd say we're already halfway there. Halfway there. Halfway there.
Wow, it certainly has been a while, hasn't it? I mean, not only has it been like a month since my last animated atrocity, but it's been an entire year since I reviewed an episode of SpongeBob. And that was a re-review. One of the saddest things about being an adult is how fast the months and years seem to fly, as the seasons and even the days of the week seem to blend together. But I think it's about time to rectify both of those problems. This is Someone's in the Kitchen with Sandy. And yeah, it's quite an annoying one. Let's dive right in, shall we? It starts off like so many other bad episodes in the later seasons. Plankton trying to get the Krabby Patty formula through a convoluted scheme. It gets to the point where I don't even really know what the plan is supposed to be anymore. So, Plankton is planning to be served in the Krabby Patty by hiding in one of the buns.
Perfect. He's headed for the front door.
Was he planning for SpongeBob to make the Krabby Patty and throw it outside the front door? Why would Plankton think the patty would go anywhere but to a customer inside the restaurant? It's the first scene, and already the problems are piling up. The customer that SpongeBob delivers the patty to is Sandy Cheeks, and she seals the patty inside her suit, and Plankton along with it. And we get a nice shot of Sandy eating disgustingly. That's gross. This lasts until Plankton nearly suffocates to death and faints. It takes her what, like 10 minutes to walk from the Krusty Krab to her home? Yeah, Plankton be dead. At the very least brain damaged. What happens next is one of the most stupid plot points in any episode of SpongeBob. Sandy takes off her fur. Okay, why? I mean, this makes no logical sense on any level. First of all, in no other episode has it ever been shown that Sandy's fur came off, or needed to. Second of all, it looks kind of impossible, even when it comes to cartoon logic. And thirdly, it's needlessly impractical. Why wash both the skin and fur separately when they're supposed to be stuck together, and you can wash them together? It would be a lot faster, and it would make a lot more sense. Oh, I know why the fur comes off. This episode needs a stupid plot device. The shower ends up filling Sandy's helmet with water and reviving Plankton.
What in Neptune's ocean is that repulsive thing?
Yeah, half of this episode is definitely a Sandy torture porn. It ends up being extremely cruel to her for largely no reason. As you might have guessed, this isn't an episode where she needlessly does cruel and monstrous experiments, or messes with fish life in any way whatsoever. Hell, she even has a personality beyond karate or science in this episode. The only thing she's done to warrant all of the pain she gets in the episode is to eat a Krabby Patty and try to take a shower. The other half of this episode, it's a ripoff of Imitation Crabs. What is with that episode? In Season 7 alone, there are 3 episodes that directly rip off Imitation Crabs. Shellback Shenanigans, Grandma's Secret Recipe, and Someone's in the Kitchen with Sandy. I have no idea why. I mean, Imitation Crabs is a fine episode. It was decent, but I don't think it's like a tour de force or anything. It was a pretty good episode of SpongeBob. It's not something like Pancakes or Chocolate Nuts. Then I might understand them trying to rip it off 50 different times. And yeah, a lot of other episodes that aren't the greatest ever get ripped off, but that's usually a one-time thing. What makes Imitation Crabs so special that it has 3 rip-offs in this one season alone?
Oh no, you can't be serious.
As serious as a shark attack.
That's racist. Sandy finds that her fur is stolen and she's been locked in the bathroom. That doesn't stop her for long though, and now she's pissed. Meanwhile, Plankton turns Sandy's fur into a robot, to predictable results. Everyone in town becomes an absolute idiot, and doesn't realize the obvious. In Imitation Crabs, it worked, because SpongeBob was the only one that the robot interacted with. And as we all know, SpongeBob's not the brightest bulb in the socket, not even during the earlier seasons. So, Plankton goes to the Krusty Krab, and, in a perfect disguise, he orders a Krabby Patty. Wait, no, he asks to be shown how a Krabby Patty is made. Why? I mean, in many episodes, including this one, it's shown that all Plankton has to do is to get a Krabby Patty outside of the restaurant, and then he's clear. Wouldn't it be much smarter if Plankton just ordered a patty? Sandy did that earlier in the episode. It's obviously not impossible. Even if you wanted to tell this plot again, the Imitation Crab story, you could do it just as easily. Instead of what happens later, just have all these obstacles keep Plankton from leaving the restaurant or getting home, instead of delaying the creation of the patty. And on top of that, if you went that route, this episode wouldn't be so much of a rehash. And of course, SpongeBob believes Plankton is Sandy. Now, here's something that's really stupid. SpongeBob explicitly tells Sandy that he can't tell her the formula, and then he says that he can show her everything else about making the patty. That's not the stupid part. The stupid part is that Plankton goes along with it. So, Plankton is here because SpongeBob is going to tell him every single part, except the one part that he wants to know. The only part that SpongeBob isn't going to tell him is the most important part. And Plankton wants to waste his time with this. Like, telling your friend everything about skydiving, but failing to mention that he doesn't have a parachute. He only has a backpack. As a vehicle for jokes, well, I think Plankton says it perfectly himself.
This is getting so tedious.
Yeah, every joke here is incredibly stupid, and they go on forever. Half of the episode is like this. As for the other half of the episode, it's a little bit more interesting, but in the worst way possible. Sandy is going through Bikini Bottom in her underwear looking for her belt.
That no-good who nabbed my pelt surely came here. Probably wanted to cash it in on the Bikini Bottom black market.
Oh, Bikini Bottom has a black market. Wait, what the fuck? Sandy asks people if anyone has seen her fur, and then they burst out laughing. You probably didn't need me to tell you that the female fish of Bikini Bottom tend to wear exactly what Sandy is wearing right now, just a bikini set. It can't be the color either, as some of the fish are pink, just like Sandy is. Also, besides losing her fur, which is something that fish don't have and shouldn't really be knowledgeable about, Sandy isn't wearing much less than she usually wears. And another thing, Sandy still has her space suit, as SpongeBob called it. Plankton didn't take that, only the helmet.
Look at a naked chipmunk.
Stole.
Aren't you ashamed having your pink rat flesh exposed?
Hey, look, a hairless goat.
A nudist ferret.
What do all of these animals have in common? That's right, kids. None of these are underwater animals, and none of the citizens of Bikini Bottom should have ever heard of any of these. You know, SpongeBob isn't the only cartoon to do this exact plot, where a character gets their clothes stolen and they must hide and sneak around. Even Samurai Jack did it, so there's definitely potential here. You can do this plot correctly, but you've got to do more than just having random characters point and laugh. Episodes like these are more about avoiding embarrassment than actually being embarrassed. It works best when their character tries to hide their nudity, but ends up in other embarrassing or awkward situations, like putting on a totally ridiculous outfit. I mean, Sandy tries to put on seaweed, but it doesn't look humorous and it's gone before anything really happens with it. After a heat vent destroys Sandy's seaweed, some cops point and laugh at her. Now here's a really stupid part. These exact cops end up arresting Sandy at the end of the episode, because public nudity is against the law. Even though at that exact time, Plankton is naked and he's been naked the entire episode. Like, what the hell? This episode is trying to tell the worst jokes, and they don't even work in the logic that the episode itself sets up. I mean, this joke might work a bit better if the cops were of a different model at the end, but no. It's the exact same cops who did nothing earlier. Why didn't they arrest her right there on the spot? What was the point except prolonging Sandy's cruelty? A lot of bad episodes of SpongeBob seem to have the entire concept of logic shit on a character. But this one, it takes the cake. If it's not boring you with whatever the hell this is, it's constantly making you cringe at the pain and humiliation that Sandy's forced to go through. And it ends with Sandy getting arrested. I can only presume because Mrs. Puff isn't in the episode. Just a fair warning, guys. This isn't just the worst SpongeBob episode that I've ever seen. This is in the top 5 of the worst episodes of any cartoon ever. Yes, I do think that it is that bad. If you continually write bad episodes, that means you're a bad writer, right? However, if you write something like this, that means that you're a bad person. Speaking of that, let's see who wrote this. Mr. Lawrence? What's the matter, Doug? Too ashamed to put your full name on this piece of shit? Actually, to be fair, Doug Lawrence has always credited himself as Mr. Lawrence. He's also the voice of Plankton himself. Make of that what you will. By the way, that title card is just creepy. The music, just like in the Splinter, doesn't fit for the hell that awaits us. The episode starts with Mr. Krabs taking a money bath in an attempt to fool us that he's anything remotely similar to who he once was. He smells something and checks up on SpongeBob, who identifies the smell as an explosive. That means that Plankton is attempting to break in. We have an action sequence in another attempt to fool us that this episode is like one of those classic SpongeBob episodes. It ends with Plankton firing a missile that doesn't seem to go off. Unfortunately, it going off wasn't the plan. It grows an arm and captures Krabs and SpongeBob. Plankton tries to get the secret formula out of Krabs. When that doesn't work, he gets it out of SpongeBob.
I don't know how to get into the safe behind the painting in Mr. Krabs' office that houses the secret formula, he won't let me near it.
One part of me thinks that that's wildly out of character for SpongeBob, but the rest of me knows that there's no character to be found anymore. When all looks to be lost, Pearl comes in, and for some reason Plankton is terrified of her. Hey guys, you do know that Plankton has had extended interactions with Pearl before, right? Apparently, Plankton is scared of Pearl because he has seen documentaries where whales eat tiny organisms. You know, in a civilization like this, you'd think it'd be a crime for one citizen to fucking eat another! Also, do you waste the functioning organisms know that whales eat krill, not plankton?
Who knew Plankton was so afraid of whales? Oh, and you better watch out. I think she's extra hungry today.
Apparently you did, dumbass.
I prefer salad over plankton anyway.
Pearl demands some mall money before she releases SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs from their trap. Then he suggests that Pearl go buy the chum bucket and give Plankton a scare. She'll do it if he doubles her mall money. So Krabs demands that SpongeBob chip in. Unfortunately, he doesn't have any money because Krabs pays him in play money. Krabs, you do know that that's illegal, right? Because Krabs can't get Pearl to scare Plankton, he asks to borrow one of her dresses.
It's not funny, it's not funny, it's not funny, it's not funny, it's not funny! It's not funny!
Meanwhile, Plankton is running home to the chum bucket. Karen is the douche that she always is, and Plankton reveals what happened to his ancestors. They got eaten. Except that they didn't because whales eat krill, you...
Okay, when you need a break from your delusional paranoia, the trash needs some attention.
You know what? I'll take care of the garbage. God, I always hated Karen. Plankton takes care of the trash and gets scared by Pearl. He barricades himself inside, only to find Pearl inside as well. Plankton runs to Karen, complaining that there's a whale in the laboratory. Of course, when Karen comes in, Pearl has disappeared.
Excuse me, I have to get back to more pertinent binary functions.
One more quip out of you and I'm installing Vista on your hard drive.
I'm not listening!
That's it. Come here. Come here. Come here. I got the disc right here. Come here. Come here. Good, that's taken care of. After
16 paranoia-filled days later.
As in yes, Krabs has been doing this for over 2 weeks. Plankton has become that. Yeah, it's no surprise that that's Krabs disguised as his daughter. So when Plankton is crying, Krabs is laughing. I hope that you're thoroughly disgusted with him, because it gets worse. By the way, Zeus, since I hate you the most, I'm going to assume that Krabs in this episode is what you're like in real life. Some part of you obviously thinks that these actions are okay, so I have no choice but to assume that you'd be willing to do shit like this in real life, and find it funny! Plankton, sleeping on a steel bed for some reason, is having a nightmare, and because it's disturbing enough, we get treated to it. He gets chased down a steel corridor by a monstrous version of Pearl, gets swallowed,
Hey! Get me out of here! No!
and meets his deceased relatives.
It's not funny, it's not funny, it's not funny, it's not funny, it's not funny! It's not funny!
It's not funny because he gets halfway dissolved by stomach acid. Aren't his screams of agony just hilarious?
I can't take it.
Wait for it. It's revealed that Krabs was the one tormenting Plankton this whole time.
What a twist!
You guys are worse at writing twists than the modern-day Shyamalan. The next day, SpongeBob is mopping up the Krusty Krabs when he hears Plankton crying.
What's the point of going on? I'll just be tortured for the rest of my life by that whale. That's it, I'm done.
Wait for it.
Go away, cheesehead! Can't you see I'm trying to get run over?
Can we hear that again?
Go away, cheesehead! Can't you see I'm trying to get run over?
One more time, please.
Go away, cheesehead! Can't you see I'm trying to get run over?
No, I think you guys get it. Just so we're clear on what's going on, Plankton, a character from a children's cartoon, has been psychologically tormented so much that he's attempting to commit suicide by getting run over. A couple of days ago, I reviewed The Mask, a Courage the Cowardly Dog episode, about some pretty hardcore themes, to make it clear that it's not the fact that they are portraying a suicide attempt, it's how they are portraying it. Speaking of which, let's see how they portray it.
In fact, better yet, just step on me as hard as you can. Would you do that for me?
I'm sorry, Plankton, but that flies in the face of my good nature.
Good nature? SpongeBob, can we talk? Just for a minute. Does ripping off someone's toenail fly in the face of your good nature? Does letting your pet be tormented by a monster fly in the face of your good nature? Does getting Squidward kicked out of the Cephalopod Lodge and upstaging him at the choir for absolutely no reason at all fly in the face of your good nature? How about invading his house and stealing his television show? SpongeBob, you have no good nature. Satan asks you for pointers. Gone is one of my favorite episodes because you are the living embodiment of evil. Just so we're clear, SpongeBob, the only good thing about the Splinter was that all of it was happening to you. Speaking of having no good nature, SpongeBob refuses to kill Plankton, but doesn't try to talk him out of committing suicide. And yes, I'm saying kill and suicide because that's just what's going on here. When Plankton sends him away, SpongeBob just walks away to talk to Mr. Krabs.
Goodbye, Pipsqueak.
Wait for it.
I just thought it would be pertinent for you to know that Plankton's laying in the street. Forlorn.
Really? He's a mess.
Krabs, you do know that driving someone to suicide is murder, right? Even if you have no conscience, which you don't, you sanguine bastard, you will go to jail if he does the deed. What am I saying? In this culture, it's okay for one citizen to fucking eat another! Then again, Pearl will probably go to jail. And you'll probably be okay with that, won't you?
Putting on a dress to frighten him? Isn't that taking it a little too far?
What I'm doing is wrong. I know it's wrong, but I'm doing it anyway. Wow, we can throw pretension onto the pile too. This episode has just everything, doesn't it?
I remind you of the fact that you disclosed the location of me safe.
Need I remind you that you are in the process of committing murder? SpongeBob decides that he can fix this. Kid, this is impossible to fix. Don't even try it. We cut back to Plankton, who is still trying to commit suicide.
Man, what does it take to get run over around here?
My money is on the show getting renewed for a 10th season. People say that the 9th season is getting better. Spoilers, it's not. It's just that they've already hit rock bottom and continue to dig deeper. The only thing they can do to get worse is to actually off a character. And they'll do it too. If you don't believe they would, then you haven't been paying attention. SpongeBob comes out to Plankton and tells him Mr. Krabs' secret fear, and lets Plankton know that Krabs was in a whale suit this whole time.
Why, that conniving bottom feeder!
Honestly, you're too kind. Plankton gets an evil grin because the writers still think that he's the bad guy. Writers, here's a crash course on morality, something you are clearly blind to, and that concerns me dearly. The guy who pays his employees in phony money, enslaves wild animals, spreads vicious rumors, counterfeits, forces employees to work 24/7, and knowingly attempts to drive someone to suicide is usually considered the bad guy. Meanwhile, we got the other guy who does, attempted thievery. I don't know, if I had to pick one or the other, I think I'd go with the thief in a heartbeat.
Oh, this is too much fun. I think I found me second calling.
What, driving people to suicide? With his newfound knowledge, Plankton is no longer scared of Krabs. He traps Krabs and sends in a mime, which happens to be Krabs' secret fear. Okay, so karma comes to bite Krabs in the ass. I don't see your problem with it. And then a pod of whales comes by and scares Plankton off. Turns out that SpongeBob had a change of heart and reveals a projector that he used to show the whales.
Okay, you really are creeping me out now.
No! No!
Let's go back to the Mask, who had a character who thought that all dogs, which could easily be replaced with men, were evil, had a reason to think such, and by the end found out that not all dogs were evil. Here, Krabs, seeing an opportunity, psychologically torments what has become a petty thief, to the point where he's attempting to commit suicide, is happy that he did it, and gets away scot-free. It's not that they portray a suicide attempt, it's how they portray it. According to this, it's okay to drive people you don't like to suicide. I don't know how this episode could possibly be worse. Actually, I do. They could have gone with the original title of this episode. According to the SpongeBob Wikia, the original title of this episode was Plankton Got Served. Was that a little on the nose for you guys? A little too mean-spirited? I'm not going to have another breakdown against you three because you aren't worth my anger. You aren't even worth my hatred. I feel nothing but contempt for you three. For this to come into your minds, to think it was funny, and to actually go through with this, I have to ask, what are you? I mean, there is only one good thing I could say about this episode. With the backlash against it, and yes, there is a wide backlash against this episode, there's no one stupid or sick enough to try to pull this stunt off again. Whatever happened to SpongeBob? Or Who Bob Wetpants? Yes, this episode is one of the two that I'm aware of that has two names. It's annoying, but Mystery with a Twistery is a lot more annoying in that regard. Bottom line, this episode needs to die. I'm just gonna put all my cards on the table. This episode has more problems than any other episode of the series. Now, that doesn't mean that I hate watching it the most. There are many episodes that I hate watching more. It doesn't mean it's the worst episode either. For example, Good Neighbors has many different problems, and The Splinter only really has one. But to most people, The Splinter is the worst episode by far. That being said, Who Bob What Pants is still bottom 10 material. It's my most hated Season 5 episode. Yes, I hate it more than Atlantis SquarePantis. Let's dig in! Speaking of Atlantis SquarePantis, this episode starts with some weird Patchy thing. I don't even know what you'd call this. It's like images of him telling us that it's a SpongeBob special? It's totally pointless, especially because we don't need Patchy to know that this is a SpongeBob special. And speaking of specials, this episode starts off a lot like The Best Day Ever, but with a kind of cruel twist. It starts with SpongeBob waking up extremely excited about the day he's about to have. In a very odd bit of foreshadowing, SpongeBob says hi to the mailman, which causes him to crash into a truck. I mean, there's an idea for a joke here, but it's just a guy talking to SpongeBob, so he gets hit by a truck. That's not funny. SpongeBob goes through a bunch of things he's going to do today, and we can already see that everyone hates him. One of the problems that you'll notice immediately about this episode is that it's very off-putting, and just incredibly mean-spirited. Normally in an episode like this, only one of the characters has an issue with SpongeBob, but since this is a special, they have to squeeze in every single character, and it all just piles into unpleasantness. And that's the best way to describe this special. It's just unpleasant. For some reason, Gary seems afraid of SpongeBob, which at this point in the series is kind of odd. I mean, Season 7 or Season 8 I totally understand, but this is Season 5, where we haven't had a Gary torture porn yet. Though SpongeBob did just accidentally cause someone to crash into a truck, but Gary didn't see that. Anyway, he squeezes Gary so hard that his shell bursts, and what we're left with is a grotesque blob. Funny, this isn't the first time that we've seen Gary without a shell, and it was never this gross before. SpongeBob gets chased out of his house and ends up running into Patrick. This knocks Patrick over and ends up destroying the cake he made for his mother that he spent all day baking. Season 5 is the season of off-screen birthdays. I don't know what I'm more confused by. The fact that Patrick was smart enough to bake a cake, the fact that he's doing it outside, or that he can actually recognize his mother this time. Angered, he calls SpongeBob Idiot Boy. Spoiler alert, this is going to happen with everyone, and I'll get to the problems with it as we go along. But it's structured all wrong. In this plot, being told off by the best friend is the straw that breaks the camel's back. SpongeBob should be told off by Patrick last, not first, which would make it the finishing blow, so to speak.
Ooh, that's the first time somebody's called me that.
No, it's not. Like, at all. People have called him idiots. Hell, people have called him worse. Blah 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 blah, episode order. This would be like if Mrs. Puff was actually surprised that SpongeBob failed his driving test on an average day of boating school. I don't know, maybe this whole thing would work better as a flashback, like a story being told of why SpongeBob is so important to Bikini Bottom. Just a thought. SpongeBob decides that Squidward would love his company, and he knocks on Squidward's door. Squidward starts scolding him, and back to the flashback idea. This is conveyed, as well as all the scoldings, like it's the first time that SpongeBob has ever been scolded. SpongeBob takes this uncharacteristically personally, which just feels completely off. What do I mean by this? Remember Good Neighbors, where Squidward repeatedly yelled at SpongeBob and Patrick, and they didn't get it through their thick skulls what was going on? That's how SpongeBob usually reacts to getting berated, and Good Neighbors is not the only example of this. On top of that, which makes this especially jarring, is that in other episodes, it's character flaws or purposeful actions that get him yelled at. Here, everyone yells at SpongeBob due to accidents, which just makes it excessively cruel, and opens absolutely no doors for a change in the character. Next, SpongeBob goes to Sandy and accidentally sprays water on her robot. By the way, Sandy has a big no shout, but it's shot all wrong. It's supposed to be simultaneous with the water. She only does it after the water lands on the robot. She also calls him Idiot Boy. Yes, everyone giving SpongeBob the exact same insult is horribly contrived. SpongeBob goes to work, where he proves to be even more incompetent than usual. This ends up getting Mr. Krabs to fall in the grease fryer. But what really gets him angry is his money burning in the fryer. His money acts like lovers because Mr. Krabs called them Mr. and Mrs. Dollar. There's an idea for a joke here, but it doesn't feel like they thought it out well enough. Mr. Krabs also calls SpongeBob Idiot Boy, and that's what breaks the camel's back. Like I said, it's structured all wrong. What's supposed to break the shell is the person closest to you, and it's not Mr. Krabs, even in this episode. Hell, in pretty much any episode. So SpongeBob starts crying like crazy, always a pleasant addition to any atrocity. The tears end up carrying him back to his house, where he packs up his stuff. After one final kick to SpongeBob's emotional crotch, he leaves a year's supply of snail food, and then he leaves. Since the house is also mad at SpongeBob for some reason, it once again just comes off as needlessly cruel and mean-spirited. So, SpongeBob decides to leave Bikini Bottom, which is actually a decent idea for a special episode. The last one that they've had in quite some time. Eventually, SpongeBob comes across Mongols? They cause him to run off a cliff and get knocked out. While he's presumably dying, we cut to Patrick knocking on SpongeBob's door. Like most specials where they feel like they can get away with extending shots, they do. Sandy comes up, and we learn that Patrick's been banging on the door for 3 hours.
I need his hot sauce for my milkshake.
But you've been drinking it. If you've been standing there for 3 hours, then the milkshake would be gone by now. Also, Sandy has literally no reason to be here. How this plot usually works is that she would feel guilty for snapping so hard. But we get nothing. No reason whatsoever. She just wants to go in because the plot demands it. They find that Gary has eaten the entire year's supply of snail food and has become grotesque once more. They find SpongeBob's note, and this makes them feel guilty about what they did. Because they didn't realize the guilt of their own accord, it makes this turnaround feel extremely forced. We cut back to SpongeBob, who has finally woken up. However, all of a sudden, he seems to have amnesia. Yes, the most overused plot device in history. Amnesia is done so much because it has all the appeal of speculative fiction, but can literally be done in any series. Now, this isn't the worst display of amnesia that I've ever seen, but it is the most pointless. This amnesia will lead SpongeBob to thinking he can't do anything right, and the rest of his personality is completely the same, except maybe a little bit more flanderized. Here's the thing. SpongeBob already thought that he couldn't do anything right because of his friends' crushing scoldings. If SpongeBob didn't have amnesia, this plot would largely be the same. Hell, it would be even better, and I'll get to why. Some travelers tell SpongeBob that his name is Cheesehead, and he finds Bubbles in his pocket. That gets these strangers to go off running in panic. And SpongeBob, yes, I'm going to keep calling him SpongeBob, there's no reason not to. It's not like the character had any sort of change whatsoever. I mean, he talks a little bit more soft-spoken, but that's literally the only difference between him and SpongeBob. Then we get a news report. Apparently, Bikini Bottom has fallen into chaos. This is caused by the customers not getting their Krabby Patties because SpongeBob isn't there. No! You cannot do that! You cannot have SpongeBob constantly screwing up people's day, and yet have the entire town depend on him to function in the exact same episode. It's backhanded, and on top of that, it's just confusing. Also, Squidward and Mr. Krabs are surprisingly mean-spirited to each other. It feels like this dialogue and these interactions belong in an entirely different series. Now here's the really insulting part. They don't think they screwed up because they called SpongeBob Idiot Boy, but because SpongeBob is no longer providing the services that they like from him. In essence, they want the good without the bad, and you can't have that. They only show minuscule amounts of regret for driving SpongeBob out of town, which makes it really forced when they want him back. It takes more than one line of dialogue from each of them, especially when it's half-assed, compared to driving SpongeBob out of town. And then there's Squidward. He is absurdly unlikable here. Remember at the end of Home Sweet Rebel, where he's dancing on the foundation of SpongeBob's house? He's like that for the entirety of this episode, and he really doesn't get any consequences for it. Yeah, this is even worse than his little yellow book performance. Alright, back to New Kelp City. And you see how SpongeBob is walking facing away from the camera? If you know about this episode, then you know about the face he's gonna make. And it just keeps you completely on edge when you're watching. You know that it's coming, but you just don't know when and you don't know where. Anyway, the city people are assholes because city people. Look, it wasn't interesting in Town and Out, and it's definitely not interesting here.
Jobless deadbeat? What a sad existence I don't remember I lead.
Yep, back to where he was emotionally before he got amnesia. Once again, totally pointless. And SpongeBob is hungry, so he goes looking for a job. Once again, people are afraid of Bubbles. It's definitely trying to build up to something, but we're over halfway done with this episode. And each time we cut to the other plot, the tension drops completely. After they build up the tension again, they drop it completely for, here it comes, worst expression of the whole fucking show. Whoever came up with that, go hurt yourself. For all the children you gave nightmares, please. Back to the other guys. Sandy has a machine that can track sponges.
It'll track any sponge within a 50-mile radius.
Oh, you're saying this thing can actually find SpongeBob?
The joke doesn't work because we already know that he doesn't want SpongeBob to be found.
This device was my last chance to get this place back into ship shape!
Yeah, he smashes it. I love it how the guy who needs SpongeBob the most doesn't realize what he did wrong. Yeah, Sandy and Patrick had a line of dialogue expressing some regret. Mr. Krabs, nada. He only wants SpongeBob back because he makes him money. Mr. Krabs tells Squidward to go find SpongeBob and threatens to fire him. Then he bribes Squidward with a Fabergé egg? Because it's worded like that, the episode forces you to think that Squidward can't have his job and the egg at the same time. So you begin expecting the episode to end with him homeless or something. Cutting back to SpongeBob, we have another mean-spirited joke towards the homeless. It's not funny, and you know what? It's kind of sick, because homeless people can't see this. It's like making a joke behind their back.
You guys mind if I bubble? But bubbles will steady the old nerves. Watch.
Okay, new rule of thumb. Anytime Bubbles is compared to smoking, it belongs in the bottom 10 episodes. It's not funny, and what surrounds it is absolutely horrible. And now I know that they've used that joke before. Also, if SpongeBob lost his memory, how does he know how he should feel about Bubbles? This bubble attracts some greaser ripoffs. Blah 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 wasted celebrity cameo. These are gangsters that hate Bubbles. That's all there is to it, really. It's kind of a letdown after all this half-ass build-up. Oh, how cute. Now to all the adult audience members, it looks like he's gonna cut SpongeBob up with a switchblade. Now we get the only entertaining part of the episode as SpongeBob uses his bubbles to fight them back. It's a decent climax. The problem is that it's actually too early for once. We're 15 minutes in out of 22 minutes. You want to start your climax at the latest possible point. And they don't. On a side note, they already did that sewer gag in a previous episode with Mr. Krabs' coin going down the drain. The bubble-popping boys get trapped in a bubble that they don't even try to pop, and they fly away. Overjoyed, everyone starts blowing bubbles. Then the Bikini Bottom mayor, who is also the mayor of New Kelp for some reason, makes SpongeBob the mayor. And you know what? If SpongeBob actually remembered what his friends said about him from before, it would be so much more satisfying. Seriously, that pointless amnesia pretty much shot your story in the head. Also, Patrick is smart enough to bake a cake, but isn't smart enough to recognize his best friend. The personality is not a joke. Seriously, this is really starting to piss me off. I'm surprised it took this long, but Patrick being stupid is not a joke. Squidward not liking SpongeBob is not a joke. Mr. Krabs being cheap is not a joke. Sandy being into science is not a joke. Stop treating them like jokes. Doing so is a one-way ticket to Flanderization, and the worst kind of places imaginable. We cut back to SpongeBob.
Don't know much about politics, or balanced budgets, or how to be a leader. I'm not exactly sure what a mayor is.
Wow, he's actually a perfect candidate for the job. When the gang tries to bring SpongeBob back, we get the final problem the amnesia brings us. Since SpongeBob doesn't remember being called Idiot Boy, they don't have to deal with what they actually did. Feeling guilty is not enough. They need to actually convince the SpongeBob that was wronged that they are sorry.
Found you? No, surprised at seeing a talking weasel.
SpongeBob, sorry, Cheesehead. Mind filling me in? What's a weasel? Come on, guys, it's not that hard to think through your jokes and make sure that they make sense in the world that you've created.
Don't pretend you don't remember me, SpongeBob.
Sorry, Sandy.
Why do I get the feeling that was actually a climax in an earlier draft of this episode? Either way, that should have been what happened in the final draft. Squidward somehow steals the limo and drives them back all to Bikini Bottom.
Decorative egg, here I come!
Wow, talk about whiplash. With how overjoyed he was that SpongeBob was gone, a priceless artifact is not enough to make him want to bring SpongeBob back.
I was a fry cook before?
Hey, the best in the business!
You know, it wouldn't hurt to at least hint at past episodes. Oh, and even though SpongeBob is leaving, Mr. Krabs gives away an extremely valuable egg. Yep, totally out of character. Squidward trips, and the egg goes flying. And hey, they figured out how to sync up the no shout. And the egg shatters on top of SpongeBob. Oh, so the Fabergé egg was a fake, because a real jeweled egg probably wouldn't break so easily on impact. Gems are extremely hard. I mean, if it was made out of glass or ceramic, hell, if it was made out of chocolate, it would still be insulting, but at least it would have made sense. SpongeBob gets his memory back.
We're really sorry we ran you out of town, boy, but we're glad you're back.
Worst. However, SpongeBob still remembers being Cheesehead. Apparently, the bubble policy has ruined New Kelp City. This entire story was pointless. Thank you for your 22 minutes. Even in an episodic show like this one, at least one character should end up in a different place than they started. That's a general rule with any story. It doesn't have to be physical or anything. They can learn a lesson, but you have to end up somewhere new. I mean, come on, a hug. Show SpongeBob's friends appreciative that he's back. Give us some sort of payoff. Instead, they give us nothing. Yeah, this episode kinda sucks. I've been getting requests since literally the very beginning. Technically, the Splinter was a request, and I tend to check them out if I can find good enough footage. Sometimes I agree, sometimes I don't. But the more requests I get, the more that I know that I have to review whatever episode. SpongeBob You're Fired is my most requested episode ever, with dozens of different people asking me about it. It aired about 2 weeks ago, and at present it is the latest SpongeBob episode to air. I watched it, and my God, I'm pretty sure that half my brain exploded. An episode like this comes around only once in a great while, and when it does, you gotta just drop everything and kill it with fire! So, let's see the geniuses behind this one. I don't know, and Doug Lawrence. You know, I wanted to believe that he was a good guy, but with his other works that I've covered, he seems to be the glue that holds the diarrhea shit together. With this one, we're not starting with the episode. We're actually starting with the concept. SpongeBob getting fired. This was really hyped up as a major thing. Here's the problem. SpongeBob has been fired on numerous occasions before. Unless this was supposed to be a series finale, I don't know what the hell the big deal is. But anyway, on to the actual episode. The plot gets off the ground really quick with SpongeBob throwing a piece of paper on the grill. It catches fire, burns down the majority of the Krusty Krab, and that forces Mr. Krabs to fire SpongeBob in an actually heart-wrenching scene. No, that would be the right thing to do. Instead, the plot doesn't seem to want to get started, and we're treating to 2 minutes of extremely boring filler. Yeah, that's one of the bigger problems with the episode. For the majority of this 22 minutes, absolutely nothing happens. After that pointlessness, Mr. Krabs comes by and says that SpongeBob is fired for, I'm not kidding here, a fucking nickel.
You know I love you like a son, but you can't argue with a nickel.
And you can't argue with logic, Mr. Krabs. How exactly does firing your best fry cook, who ends up bringing in the majority of your customers, possibly save any money whatsoever?
How about if I work for free?
Apparently, it's illegal, and I lose my vendor's license.
Doing illegal shit hasn't stopped you before, you fat bastard.
Hey, what about me? Can I get fired too? I'm afraid not, Squidward. You've got seniority.
I thought that the corporate scumbags tried to get rid of the employees with seniority because they'd save more money that way. The ways this logically doesn't make any fucking sense are piling up rapidly. And we're pretty much still dealing with the concept here. Then we get, I call them visual gags, but they aren't remotely funny. And then this episode decides to go a day without tears. We get, I'm not kidding, more than an entire minute that consists of almost nothing but SpongeBob crying, which is, for the record, one of the most annoying sounds in the world. To be fair, there are things going on in the background, but
I'm not a very strong swimmer.
You're a fucking fish! Eventually Squidward kicks SpongeBob out and does a bunch of gloating that really makes him seem like an ass.
But now that SpongeBob's gone, who will be running the grill?
Yeah, that's a good question, considering that neither of you assholes can cook.
No, I was 5 times Golden Spatula in the Navy.
No, you were head chef on the SS Diarrhea, and you couldn't even cook peas. We've done all of this before. I mean, you guys have ripped off like 4 episodes already. Hell, even the damn title's a rip-off. So, what are we going to rip off now?
Hey, Gary, I'm home.
Oh no, you'd better not rip off a pal for Gary. You better fucking not.
Oh, I'm sorry. Here I am wallowing in my misery and it's past your dinner time.
Holy fucking shit. Never mind SpongeBob getting fired. Him actually caring about Gary for once in his life? That's what you should have announced as the special. I mean, that's something that I legitimately haven't seen in years. Then SpongeBob starts crying some more, which is then echoed by Patrick. Oh great, he's in this episode. This can't be good. He says he was crying because SpongeBob was crying. Fan-fucking-tastic. He comes in through the window. Ha ha, get it? He didn't use the door. Then we get a few jokes that are just used to pad out the episode.
Frothy frappe? I can't think of any more food that starts with the letter C, SpongeBob.
Tell a story. Barring that, at least only waste 11 minutes of my time. Eventually, SpongeBob admits that he got fired, and Patrick tells him that it's great to be unemployed. That's a great lesson for the kids. So the next day, Patrick is going to teach him the wonders of unemployment. He goes over to SpongeBob's house to see a clever callback to the very first SpongeBob ratings trap. Oh, and SpongeBob looking like a wreck, maybe. Compared to the disturbing faces that the show has shoved in front of me, he actually looks halfway presentable. If this is them trying to gross me out, they're losing their touch. Their first stop is Squidward's house. They annoy him to get food tossed at them which they use for breakfast. Squidward, for some reason, is stupid enough to throw food at both of them. You'd think that Squidward would be ecstatic, considering that SpongeBob was just fired yesterday. I'd expect him to be in a really cheery mood, and having a party. Or at least at work. If I point out all the fucking plot holes, we'll be here all day. Then Patrick decides to take a nap. This is a long and tedious segment. Nothing of substance happens. SpongeBob puts snail slime on himself, gross, and tries to hook onto the rock. Then you see him just breathing loudly for way too fucking long. It's another long portion of nothing happening. Hell, waiting had more of a plot than this stupid episode. I mean, there's one part where SpongeBob eats a part of himself, and it grows back. That's something, right?
Feeling any better yet?
I will when you tell a fucking story! Patrick says that free lunch with friends always cheers him up, so they go to Sandy's Tree Dome, where some people seem to be eating experimental food. The first guy seems to be allergic to it. Then it completely mutates Patrick. Sandy sees SpongeBob and... oh god. I'm thinking about taking back what I said about face freeze.
What are you doing with these here freeloaders?
Question! Isn't one of those freeloaders your friend? When SpongeBob tries to eat the stuff, Sandy stops him.
Here's a psychological test to see how much weird gunk folks will eat. If it's free.
Wow. I mean fucking wow. Hey Sandy, don't you think that the homeless might want to try a free food? Also, don't you think that scientists should have some kind of morality? This is something that Plankton would be doing, or should be doing, not you. Hell, Andrew Ryan wouldn't do shit like that. Then we get...
SpongeBob, you're a mess. You're falling apart.
Get it? You probably thought that they already used all of those fucking jokes, but no. They still got a few. They were saving that one. Sandy tells SpongeBob that he needs to get a new job. When he tells Patrick this, the mutated head thing smack talks him.
I'm going to punch your face. In the face.
SpongeBob makes his muscle go away and...
I'm ready! Woohoo!
Holy shit. Did he really say that?
I'm ready! me.
It's like a voice from the heavens.
I'm ready for a new job,
It almost sounds like Tom Kenny's out of practice saying SpongeBob's supposed catchphrase. Unfortunately, that's the highlight of this episode. Now it goes downhill extremely fast. Instead of ripping off one episode, we gotta rip off two now. SpongeBob goes into a hot dog place, and the writers pretty much shrink Krusty dogs. Unfortunately, SpongeBob can't cook anything but Krabby Patties. You know, the entire conflict from the Big Switch. It's gonna help pad out this episode. The hot dog guy is not pleased. And neither is the pizza guy, the taco guy, or the noodle guy. By the way, each of these processes were as long as the first one. SpongeBob goes home and once again remembers to feed Gary. Unfortunately, they're out of snail food. So SpongeBob needs to make some of his own. Let me guess. He accidentally makes a Krabby Patty. Actually, no. He makes a can of snail food. Then why the fuck couldn't he make the other food like he was supposed to? Gary likes it, and despite SpongeBob placing all the contents in Gary's bowl and the can in the trash, Patrick somehow has some, and he likes it too.
What's that, Gary? It's the best food you've ever had?
So, does SpongeBob start selling snail food and become a corporate mastermind? Nope, he gets kidnapped by the hot dog people. That subplot goes absolutely nowhere. In fact, it's completely forgotten about from this point forward. Apparently, the hot dog guy regretted their decision to fire SpongeBob. Call him back and say that it was a misunderstanding. You don't have to fucking kidnap him!
Thing is, my customers love your little sliders.
You mean the ones that you threw on the floor?
I'm pretty sure this is illegal.
Nothing that you aren't used to, SpongeBob. The pizza guy frees SpongeBob and kidnaps him. You know where this is going. The noodle guy and the taco guy also try kidnapping SpongeBob, despite the former throwing SpongeBob's food out at him, and the latter having SpongeBob's food spray his customers in the face. All of a sudden, a burger superhero comes by and saves SpongeBob by destroying the other food. It's not as exciting as it sounds.
It's the Killer Patty!
So is this a common occurrence then? Bikini Bottom apparently now has a patty superhero. The hot dog gives up and gets hit by a bus. One-course meal flashbacks. The Killer Patty takes SpongeBob back to the Krusty Krab because Mr. Krab sucks as a chef. Apparently it was Squidward in the costume. Who knew that he could brawl like that? Oh wait, he can't. At all. They want SpongeBob back. And SpongeBob? This is where you tell Mr. Krabs to fuck off. You are able to make grade A snail food, which you can continue to make and sell, probably making a great living off of, while the guy who fired you for a fucking nickel goes out of business. But no, the status quo is God. You know what? That is my new least favorite cliche. You're off the hook, mopey dopey love talk. In a blatant recycling of the beginning of the episode, SpongeBob starts cleaning up the restaurant and puts Squidward in a dress. If this episode has anything, fucking anything, it's that that's the extent of misery that Squidward goes through. I mean, they could have easily hit him with that door. First time I watched this, I thought he phased through it. For some reason, the Krusty Krab gets all the customers back that were chased off, including the guys who kidnapped SpongeBob. No, that doesn't make any sense. At all. Unless they're gonna try to kidnap SpongeBob again afterwards. Oh, and Mr. Krabs, because he couldn't afford to lose a fucking nickel, put in a pay toilet, which probably cost hundreds of dollars to install. Before I show you guys this animated Atrocities note page, I want to show you the one for one course meal. Remember that the higher the number, the worse the episode is. Now here's the one for One Night in Gottlieb, an episode from the worst cartoon ever made. Now here's the one for SpongeBob You're Fired. If the Splinter was the point where the show officially needed to die, this is the point where Nickelodeon officially needs to die. Let's hope they take Viacom with it when they do. Now, when SpongeBob does something so horrendous, they tend to do it only once. Well, needless to say, I was wrong. Dead fucking wrong. I was originally going to review Little Yellow Book this week because it proves that the writers have found a way to make Squidward unlikable, even after everything you guys saw last week. I will get to it eventually, but just like with SpongeBob You're Fired, I found something so heinous that I needed to kill it as soon as possible. Actually, I wanted to review it right away because I don't ever want to watch this episode again. Over the past week, I've been trying to figure out how many atrocities that SpongeBob has. If you're wondering, we're currently up to 118. I have recently marathoned the entirety of Season 8. And I found something that I didn't thought exist. I thought that it couldn't exist. Let me put this as bluntly as possible. At its core, Pet Sitter Pat is a shitty ripoff of A Pal for Gary. No joke. It even has the exact same team of quote-unquote writers. Hell, we just might want to call it a shitty remake of A Pal for Gary. The most hated and infamous episode of the whole show. What are we waiting for? Let's get started. This episode starts with SpongeBob getting a letter inviting him to his grandmother's birthday party. He's excited to go, but ends up tripping over Gary. Then he remembers that someone needs to watch him. Since he's going to be gone for an entire day, it is more believable than his paranoia from A Pal for Gary. And that probably refers to exactly what pisses me off about this episode. It seems like the writers wanted to improve a pal for Gary, but completely missed what the fuck the problem was. So, SpongeBob is incredibly believable in this episode, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Believe it or not, this episode is a Patrick's a Prick episode, and the absolute worst in that category. You thought he was bad and smooth jazz at Bikini Bottom? You haven't seen nothing yet. SpongeBob comes to Patrick and finds him mumbling to his reflection because he thinks it's a real person. Whatever. Then SpongeBob asks Patrick to take care of Gary.
Are you going off the grid?
What?
Don't worry. I know what to do.
Why would you assume that?
I'm trusting my best pal to watch carefully over Gary while I'm gone.
And then he drops Gary on the ground. Yeah, you probably already see where this is going. SpongeBob gives Patrick a list of things he has to do in order to take care of Gary, but Patrick is more interested in eating SpongeBob's food. So SpongeBob leaves, saying that he will be back by 10.
Then you
SpongeBob! Don't you trust me? I am the most responsible guy you know.
Fight me! SpongeBob leaves and Patrick tries to read the list. Unfortunately, he holds it upside down, thinks that SpongeBob has terrible handwriting, and throws it away. He then offers to take Gary for a walk, but indigestion catches up with him and he rushes to the bathroom. And then he ends up staying there until late at night. When he gets out, Gary is obviously weak and hungry. Patrick tears open the food bag and eats the entire thing right in front of Gary. Did I tell you how much I despise these writers' guts? Then Patrick goes looking for more food while he cuts a SpongeBob at his grandmother's. It seems that she made him a special gelatin snail, prompting him to be worried about Gary. He uses the phone, and Patrick says that Gary is absolutely fine. Guys, just because I can believe SpongeBob's ignorance and his concern does not mean this episode is better. It's actually worse, because you've used this as an excuse to make Gary's treatment more cruel. You don't fucking believe me? When SpongeBob tells Patrick to give Gary a bath, things get really fucking bad. Patrick holds Gary underneath the smelly pits, claiming that Gary smells bad, and then he turns on the sink. Then he fills the sink with snail food.
Gotta get the water to stay in there somehow.
I am this close to snapping right now. This fucking close!
Oh, Gary, we don't eat the bath, we get in the bath.
You guys already know that I absolutely hate these writers. I despise their guts. Want them blacklisted. Zeus Service is clearly some kind of sadistic asshole that lives in a world of insane troll logic. Richard Purcell is just a plain sadist. And Casey Alexander, he's a complete idiot. Casey, you're a fucking moron. Back to the episode, where Gary's food has dissolved. He attacks Patrick and runs off. I'm not entirely sure, but I kinda think that we're supposed to see Patrick as the protagonist. SpongeBob calls up again.
Okay, I get it, SpongeBob, I get it!
Please hit him with something! Thank you. Patrick ends up in a bathtub himself, and ends up breaking the shower head. Then he almost tells Gary that it's time for his bath.
Wait a minute, Patrick. You gotta trick the snail. You gotta be smarter than him.
What exactly did you have in mind?
Hey, buddy. I got something cool to show you.
Patrick? What is that?
And it's the opposite of a wet, watery bath.
What do you mean by that? Jesus fucking Christ! Is this supposed to be funny? No, they cannot be that stupid. The only other reason that I can think of Patrick having a fucking flamethrower is that they're trying to show how dangerous he is to Gary, which they already fucking did!
Doesn't that look fun?
I have nothing. I have literally nothing to say to that. Look, this goes beyond stupidity. I've said in the past that you made a character too stupid when they're doing something that could not conceivably have a positive outcome. But they're way past the point of no return with Patrick. This character is a monster. A literal monster. Yeah, pretty much exactly like Puffy Fluffy. This thing needs to be locked up before it can cause any more pain and suffering. His charming stupidity from the early seasons has morphed into the most hated character on the show for me. More than SpongeBob, more than Karen, and even more than Mr. Drive You to Suicide Krabs.
Well, make up your mind. Is it water or fire?
Lock him up? No. This thing needs to be killed before he can cause anyone any harm ever again. He chases Gary down with a hose and bathes Gary on the spot. Gary's sounds of agony make it sound like he's in very real pain.
That wasn't so bad, now was it?
You chased him down with a fucking flamethrower, you brain-dead burden to everyone around you. And a can of food falls on Gary because our writers think that pure pain is funny.
Oh, now I gotta dry you off. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any salt.
That kills snails, you fuck. I know that that's the fucking joke, but I don't care. It's obviously not fucking funny. Incompetence, almost killing someone's pet repeatedly, is not fucking funny. So Patrick uses a hairdryer that hardens Gary. Yeah, as bad as a pal for Gary is, Gary makes it through relatively unscathed, the nightmares notwithstanding. He's in constant pain in this episode, and the camera just keeps holding on what Patrick just did to the poor guy. And because Patrick left all the waters running, the house begins to flood. This eventually gets Patrick to wake up.
Oh, sheesh, Gary. Well, if you wanted another bath, why didn't you just ask?
You know, I don't normally do this, but that line was so infuriating that we need to take a break. I've already shown you Casey Alexander's Twitter feed, but let's go back to that and have ourselves a little laugh. It was filled with so many little nuggets of information, like this one, or this one referring to one-course meal, or this one. So Casey Alexander is currently a storyboard supervisor on Uncle Grandpa. Note to self, do an animated atrocity review on Uncle Grandpa in the very near future. As for now, Casey, this is to you. Arrogance and stupidity are the worst traits to have together. John Enter, come at me, bro. Now back to this atrocity that you had roughly 1/3 part in, and don't understand why it was wrong. We cut to SpongeBob giving his grandmother a cake with a ton of candles. This makes SpongeBob imagine that his own house is on fire, and he uses the phone again. Patrick answers it, and when they go under a water stream, SpongeBob finally figures out that something is wrong. He hurriedly ends his grandmother's party and rushes home. He opens the door to find his house destroyed, and then he finds Gary okay and reading a bedtime story to Patrick. Yeah, there's no explanation to why Gary would want anything to do with Patrick after he chased him down with a fucking flamethrower! Normally, pets wouldn't want anything to do with you if you forgot to feed them, which Patrick also did, but Patrick went above and beyond. Yeah, you know my saying, what I'm doing is wrong. I know it's wrong, but I'm gonna do it anyway. After a pal for Gary's universal scorn, the writers had to know that it was a terrible episode. There are only two real options. They either didn't know, or they didn't fucking care. And after going through Casey Alexander's Twitter, I'm going with the latter option. If you're wondering why I'm taking this shit so seriously, it's because that I have a faint hope that I might be loud and abrasive enough to crack through their thick skulls and help them actually find a clue. But the more I watch, the more I realize that that's never going to happen. These people are detached from reality. This episode shows that they have no comprehension of writing. This tells me that they thought the only problem with the pal for Gary was SpongeBob's obliviousness. You know, not the sadistic cruelty that lasted throughout the entire episode, not the broken plot that took out of nowhere twists, not how horribly unfunny it was. I love it how Casey Alexander talks like he's a big shot with mountains of skill and experience, when all he's ever done is SpongeBob from season 4 onwards, and Uncle Grandpa. Casey, you're not an artist. I know we live in the self-esteem generation, but you're not an artist. You don't make art. You make crap. You have always made crap. The few miracles that just so happen to have your name in the credits don't change that. You have no talent. Stop acting like you do, and maybe I'll have the slightest inkling of respect for you. Oh, this episode was a long time coming, and it's put me in a rather interesting position, because while I think that this episode is bad, it's got a reputation similar to One Course Meal and a pal for Gary, that to be frank, I don't think that it's really earned. Let's get a few things out of the way. First of all, this episode is not a ripoff of One Course Meal, just because it contains a suicide joke. That's like saying that Squid's Day Off is a ripoff of Squeaky Boots, because they both feature a character going insane. For an episode to be a ripoff, it needs to steal at least a majority of the previous plot. This episode does not. Secondly, this is not the Squidward suicide creepypasta. The actual creepypasta did not happen. It doesn't exist, and all it really is an internet ghost story. And it's not a very good one. Any creepypasta that uses the word hyper-realistic is crap on the spot, rule of thumb. The episode may be referencing the creepypasta, hell, it might be inspired by the creepypasta, but it is not the creepypasta. Now that that's out of the way, let's get into why the episode is actually bad, which is pretty different because if you don't consider each of the shorts at the top of my top 10 lists, this is probably the closest atrocity to being good so far. I'm serious about this. Then again, the episode starts with our good old Patrick Star eating something out of the dumpster. And considering what I previously reviewed, that's not a good way to start an episode. Anyway, we see SpongeBob going through some kind of book, and the similarities are striking. But seriously, this is a book that SpongeBob is happy to share. It's SpongeBob's workbook. He says that it's his happy book, and that's where all of his happiest memories have occurred. SpongeBob asks what Squidward's happiest memory is, and apparently Squidward doesn't have one. And he sounds pretty depressed inflecting on that. Alright, let's talk about continuity here. I understand that things don't carry over from episode to episode, and no matter where they end, the next episode will usually start from the very same beginning. There are loads of shows like that. Hell, Dexter's Laboratory pretty much ended each episode with the world blowing up. But here's the thing, that only goes so far. We've seen in numerous occasions, hinted or blatantly, that Squidward has had happy memories. Things like Band Geeks and House Fancy, hell, even Truth or Square. What I'm getting at is this. There's a difference between neglecting continuity and neglecting a piece of the character, a piece of the style and the formula. formula. In most episodes, Squidward is, I guess, glum. But this episode, he's literally clinically depressed. But saying that Squidward has never had a happiest memory is kind of like saying that SpongeBob doesn't know who his parents are. It's something we almost constantly see conflicting evidence against. It's one of those things, you know? It's not going against continuity, it's going against the structure of your show. I'll grant that they do this fairly often, you know, it's SpongeBob's supposed to be annoying, not blind to the world around him. Speaking of SpongeBob, he's actually worried about Squidward not having a happiest memory. It actually seems really genuine. Squidward tells SpongeBob to leave him alone, and then he starts crying. SpongeBob decides to help Squidward find a happiest memory. Unfortunately, that doesn't work. They go to a symphony, but Squidward gets hit in the eye. Yeah, please stop hitting people in the eyes with shit. It's not funny. They find Squidward's art in a museum. No reason is ever given except bringing Squidward into misery. An amazing artist comes by and destroys it with a flamethrower. Flamethrowers don't work underwater, there is no reason for the art to be here, blah blah blah, you've heard me complain about this before. Oddly enough though, the episode entitled Fiasco was actually kinda decent. Next, SpongeBob takes Squidward in a balloon, but he's afraid of heights. All this time you're wondering why I didn't consider this episode for the Squidward torture porn list. Well, I don't really consider this episode a Squidward torture porn. You see, in episodes like Boating Buddies or Choir Boys, it's all about trying to tear Squidward down, make him miserable. In this episode, SpongeBob is actually trying to cheer Squidward up. And here's the thing, the important thing. I actually believe his intent. I don't know why. Maybe it's that not any of the bad things that happened to Squidward, most of them anyway, weren't caused by SpongeBob, at least in the beginning where it was most important. At the end of the semi-montage, Squidward is defeated and he goes into his house. He is quite literally depressed, and this is probably the episode's biggest problem. They play the depression really seriously. Like, it's not funny or compelling or anything, it's just really sad. 2 weeks later, and we see that the house is in shambles. Squidward doesn't want to see SpongeBob.
Well, at least we know he's still alive.
Those words send this episode miles ahead of episodes like A Pal for Gary or One Course Meal. They treat this serious issue as a serious issue. Novel concept, I know. But here's the thing. When you're dealing with a concept like this, jokes don't really work. It shatters the tone completely. I mean, The Mask is a great episode, but I wouldn't call it funny or anything. Yes, there were jokes, but there were very few and very far in between. I mean, this concept here wasn't beyond salvaging. An episode about SpongeBob trying to cheer Squidward up is a decent idea for a SpongeBob episode, especially if they went with the usual dynamic of Squidward simply being annoyed by SpongeBob. But let's get serious. Let's talk about what you guys want me to talk about here. The suicide jokes. Yes, there are 2 of them here. Squidward depressedly shoves his head into an oven only to pull out brownies. That's actually kinda easy to miss. I mean, my little sister missed it the first time she watched it, so to make sure that you didn't miss it, they had him throw up a rope, only to pull up a birdcage, which my little sister didn't miss. So, let's talk about them, because, to be honest, they've done suicide jokes before. Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy 4, for example. No, not One Course Meal. That wasn't a joke, that was a part of the fucking plot. Why it works in other areas is because you know that the character isn't going to end it, making it pretty much an exaggeration of the scenario. Here, though, the joke is Squidward gonna kill himself? Which, let's be completely honest here, isn't funny. When you're worried if a guy is actually gonna kill himself, then it probably can't be funny. What do you guys want me to say? It doesn't work, it can't work, and everyone knows that it can't work. Anyway, Squidward gets a package, SpongeBob pops out and traps him in a box. Then he takes Squidward to a party full of paper-mache SpongeBobs. Squidward tears them apart and claims that he's found a happiest memory. Okay, so final thoughts here. How would I make this episode work? Simple. Make it less depressing. Don't have Squidward literally in a depression that honestly didn't seem to have much of a catalyst, as if they were implying that Squidward really does have clinical depression at all times. He's constantly muttering how empty his life is, even before SpongeBob tries and fails to give him a happiest memory. Like I said, SpongeBob trying to cheer Squidward up after, I don't know, a bad day or something would have been fine. Taking it as seriously as they did, number one, it kinda comes out of nowhere. I mean, this episode starts with general shenanigans, so you're not expecting it to go full-fledged depressing. While nowhere near as tasteless as One Course Meal or A Pal for Gary or even Stuck in the Ringer, yeah, those suicide jokes shouldn't be here. I don't know what show could make, oh, is he gonna kill himself? Work as a joke, but it certainly isn't this one. Honestly, it kind of feels like it's trying too hard to be shocking, which doesn't make any sense. One thing's for sure, SpongeBob doesn't really need to try that hard to be shocking. Says it all, doesn't it? Wow, did I get a lot of requests for this one? You guys really seem to hate this episode, and watching it again, I can definitely see why. Everything it does is wrong. Beyond wrong, actually. So, by popular request, let's tear Stuck in the Ringer a new one. Wow, we are off to an amazing start. You may remember our first writer, Zoo Service, and his other masterpiece, A Pal for Gary. And it looks like he's one of the creative geniuses who brought us One Course Meal. I'm super excited already! But that's not the only veteran who helped make this beauty. Hot off his work creating the Splinter, we have Sean Charmats. And then there's Derek Iverson, who created the creepiest fuck squids visit and would eventually go on to help pen Demolition Doofus. It looks like we got ourselves a dream team here. It starts with SpongeBob taking a shower until he over-dramatically drops the soap because the writers think that that's funny. Ha ha ha, nothing of substance happened. Then SpongeBob cleans his brain because the writers don't know jack shit about comedy. When the shower's done, SpongeBob cleans himself off with a laundry wringer.
What would I do without you, Ringer?
Use towels, perhaps? Maybe drip dry in the fucking ocean? SpongeBob gets dressed and is prepared to go to work, but slips on soap and bounces into his tub to pad out the episode's length. He steps on a rubber duck, which startles him to step on another bar of soap, which gets him stuck in the wringer. He tries to use his tongue to get himself out, but ends up breaking the handle. Hey, this kind of reminds me of real-life situations when people can't get their hands or other extremities out of nooks or machinery. They spend days calling for help that never comes, eventually forced to cut off that extremity in pure desperation. And these hacks think that a scenario like that can be used for comedy. Patrick comes in looking for his rubber duck. Okay, what season is this episode? Ah, I see. Yeah, by this point, Patrick had an IQ of -75. When SpongeBob asks for help, Patrick uses Forever Glue to help SpongeBob be stuck forever. Yes, Patrick really has become that stupid. Speaking of that, you know what I find interesting? In these SpongeBob torture porns, he's actually really close to his original personality. In this episode, especially. So the glue hardens because the writers think that crippling someone is funny. Of course, SpongeBob's only concern is getting to work, which yes, is very similar to his original characterization. Patrick does manage to help slightly by breaking the wringer off the floor, so SpongeBob gets to work and starts making Krabby Patties. And when Squidward sees the wringer, he of course laughs at SpongeBob's misery. And then this happens. Alright, dumbasses. Or should I say dumbass? I think it's safe to assume that the one writer from the Splinter wrote this fascinating piece of the episode. From what I can gather, Sean Charms is like Dave Polsky if he was terrible at slapstick and really, really hated people. An important rule of slapstick is to never, ever harm the eyes, fingernails, or toenails on camera. You've also got to be very careful with teeth. Those are extremely sensitive parts of our bodies, eyes especially, and pain towards them will automatically make us cringe. It is possible to do eye-related slapstick, like say someone is trying to open a switchblade and looking really closely at it. If you want it to be funny, when the blade goes off, you've got to move the camera somewhere else as that guy screams. From Derek Iverson, who seems to have some bizarre psychological horror fetish. When someone asks for a refill, SpongeBob jumps up and causes the cash register to fall on his foot. Once again, the pain is raised to cringe-inducing levels. Then we have shenanigans that eventually ends with the cash register emptying on the floor. This, of course, gets Mr. Krabs to come into the picture.
Help! I think you've helped quite enough today.
Remember that line. SpongeBob gets kicked out of the Krusty Krab and bumps into the cause of all of his pain. Patrick tries to cheer SpongeBob up instead of, I don't know, taking him to a hospital. They go to an ice cream parlor where SpongeBob is unable to eat his ice cream because the wringer is apparently stuck on his esophagus. Wow, that's just great. They're implying that SpongeBob is eventually going to starve to death because of that thing. Because, you know, if you can't swallow something like ice cream, that tube is closed. Tightly. Oh, and would you look at that? Patrick eats SpongeBob's ice cream like a good friend. Next, they go to the carnival, where we're treated to some scenes where SpongeBob can't play any of the games or ride on any of the rides. He even gets a shiner in the process. Hey, writers, I don't care who the hell you're doing this to. Torturing a character is not funny. Speaking of torture, sometime later, Patrick comes around with some cotton candy for winning a dart tournament. Wow, you sent your friend flying, but instead of looking to see if he's okay, you go and play darts. Some goddamn friend you are! Finally, SpongeBob has had enough, and he knocks the cotton candy to the ground.
Maybe now you know how I feel about you ruining my life!
Well said. So, SpongeBob finally tells Patrick off.
Help! I think you've helped quite enough today!
Hey, it's exactly like that other scene. Of course, the townspeople angrily shout at SpongeBob despite running excitedly towards their fight. Yeah, I suppose it's okay to yell at someone for some minor accidental vandalism, but it's not okay to yell at someone for ruining your life due to their incomprehensible stupidity.
You deserve what you've gotten. Come on, we're out of here.
Not screw you. Screw you all. I knew Zeus' service would shine through eventually. In fact, I think he was in charge of the rest of the episode. Patrick tries to stay mad at SpongeBob, but is unable to. He runs to SpongeBob's house, breaks in, and finds something that wouldn't be out of place in a horror story. I guess Derek ain't done yet.
What's that? I can't hear you, what with all the lonely voices in my head.
Torture Squidward, torture Squidward, torture Squidward, torture Squidward, torture Squidward, torture Squidward.
Oh, I love that part.
And now we come to the most infamous part of the episode. Patrick cries, and that starts to melt the glue. Okay, before we move on, tears are essentially salt water. They live in the ocean. Do you dumbasses see the fucking problem?
Crying does solve your problems after all.
Isn't it great that they're trying to teach kids such valuable lessons in life? Alright, you three. What's the word I'm looking for? Dipshits? No, that word is too good for you. Assholes? That's not quite right either. Fuckers? No. I'm just gonna call you three excuses for humanity until I can find a description that properly suits your crude, idiotic, and juvenile talentless asses. What reality do you three live in? I really want to know. I'm genuinely curious. In this reality, it's conventional wisdom that it actually takes an adult to write for children. What am I saying? That's not fair. Children would make better writers than you three. Hell, infants would. My dog would. You mindless, degenerate hacks. You three may want to thank your lucky stars every second of every day that whatever the fuck you sold your souls to was stupid enough to give you your jobs. Because if you lose your jobs writing this trite shit, you'll most likely never work again. Not just in television, but in any job. I don't know anyone who would lower themselves so substantially to even reluctantly want your demented, poisoned minds around. Just leave us all alone and go back to the fucking sledge you came from. Wow, I should have done this one a long time ago. The only thing that kept this episode from being reviewed earlier were some worse episodes and some less uniquely bad episodes. Because this episode is a special kind of bad. One that will get you remembered forever. You know, it's kind of like The Room or Birdemic. If any episode could be pointed to as a definitive sign that SpongeBob jumped the shark, this would be that episode. Because this is the kind of stuff that you write when you don't care anymore and think that anything will be acceptable. The plot is that SpongeBob falls in love with a sandwich. That's really all I need to tell you to stay away. It's not a cute puppy love kind of thing either. It's real and romantic. So, without any further delays or ado, let's tear this apart. The episode starts with SpongeBob singing off-key. Never start an episode with off-key singing. Unless the episode is musical, and this one debatably isn't, you shouldn't start an episode off with a song anyway.
Someday I'm gonna make you my sweetie, not overtly, but surreptitiously.
You can't exactly do something stealthily if your job is to do that thing. What baffles me here is that they clearly know what that word means, and are almost intentionally misusing it. Also, SpongeBob can tell the sex of each Krabby Patty. I don't want to know how that works.
In all my years of fry cookery, I have never seen such a lovely group of patties.
Oh good, you finally passed Jim. About a dozen episodes after his first appearance, SpongeBob essentially has a love-at-first-sight meeting with one of them, who he dubs Patty. And because he doesn't want the sandwich to get eaten, he hides it behind his back. Actually, the problem here is that SpongeBob doesn't seem to feel enough for the patty. He's afraid that the patty is going to get eaten, but the patty wasn't personified enough to translate that emotion to the audience. What we see is a typical sandwich about to get eaten, and SpongeBob acting like an idiot and going completely against his job, which is pretty much his purpose in life at this point. Giving more identity to the object is typically how these stories usually go, but here it's completely out of left field that SpongeBob cares about a patty enough to not have it eaten, and that's an accomplishment in bad writing. Squidward suggests that SpongeBob take the Krabby Patty on a date, and so he does. Also, a random joke about a grilled shoe that doesn't make any sense. SpongeBob is clearly wearing both of his shoes, he wasn't in any particular rush, he hadn't forgotten the pickles recently, and the shoe was fried, not grilled.
Oh, Patty, when we're together, I feel like we're in our own little world. Like nothing can hurt us.
You know, they actually did this better in a later episode, Gone. SpongeBob was starting to put character into inanimate objects because virtually everyone in his life had disappeared, and he was going insane. Maybe if SpongeBob breathed in too many fumes or hit his head or something, this episode would make some semblance of sense. But no. Eventually Patrick comes over and asks to be tied up in knots. Yeah, the jokes in this episode, they don't really make much sense. They're too focused on writing romance, which is weird because this show isn't known for romance. Even their Valentine's special didn't really have any romance. And when they do have romance, it's often reserved for side characters because, well, I suppose I should bring this up. Steven Hillenburg has said that SpongeBob is essentially asexual, meaning that he is incapable of feeling romantic attraction to anyone of either gender. Now, I won't get into a debate on how much that matters, because the argument is lengthy, and some creators are the only people who should touch their creation, and some creators are the only people who shouldn't touch their creation. But I will say this, it does feel like an insult to the original vision. Romance is extremely hard to write well beyond the superficial stuff, which is why I tend to hate most romance stories. And when you do a strange romance like this, you need to be a goddamn expert to make it not seem like you're trying to release your own fetishes. Yeah, the only episode that feels more like a fetish story than this is probably Squid Baby. The only way that I think this story could ever work is if it was clear that SpongeBob thought that the Krabby Patty was completely sentient. Like, SpongeBob slowly began to think that it was alive or something. This is one of the few episodes where Plankton should have been in that he wasn't. Either way, it's not much of an excuse for SpongeBob to be a total dick to his friends. Bringing the previous point back, we've never seen SpongeBob remotely have any romantic interest that wasn't a stupid joke to be creepy, so his behavior just seems completely out of character on every level. Especially because he's the person who should most of all know the purpose of a Krabby Patty.
I've been replaced by a sandwich!
Good.
Maybe I could be in a lovely sandwich of my own! Yeah! That'll show SpongeBob!
Is the episode trying to satirize itself? I don't get it. And now we get the episode's song. It starts out kinda nice until SpongeBob starts shrieking like an idiot. I won't talk too much about it because you can sample it for yourself. It's downloadable content for Rock Band too, for some reason. One scene we see some people looking at SpongeBob slightly confused, and if this episode was trying to be funnier, we would have seen more reactions like that. You know, kinda like Rockabye Bivalve. Ah yes, speaking of that, there's the worst scene of the episode, where SpongeBob murders a bunch of clams, really grotesquely. I could tell you everything wrong with this, but I think I'll just leave you with what Junior thought after SpongeBob brutally ripped him apart.
When somebody loved me, everything was beautiful. Every hour we spent together lives within my heart. And when I was sad, he was there to dry my tears. And when he was happy, so was I. When he loved me. Though the years went by, I stayed the same, but he began to drift away. I was left alone, still I waited for the day when he'd say, I will always love you. Lonely and forgotten, never thought he'd look my way, but he smiled at me and held me just like he used to do. When he loved me like he loved me. Every hour we spent together lives within my heart. When he loved me.
Even if none of those clams were Junior, I still don't think that SpongeBob should be essentially decapitating birds with his bare hands. It just doesn't seem right for a children's icon to be doing that to protect an inanimate sandwich!
Sweeter than honey from your pickles to your buns. It ain't even funny.
I have a nagging suspicion that they know the exact problem with the episode. But one of the biggest problems with the episode is that the Krabby Patty wasn't made relatable enough to the audience. That's the only way you could ever make this bottom shelf plot work. So, the patty starts to smell like shit.
It's our 6-hour anniversary. And do you know what that means?
Please don't say second base. Please don't say second base. Please don't say second base.
Brett, I know what'll make you feel better. A dinner at the finest restaurant in Bikini Bottom.
Oh, so Patty's a cannibal. Good to know. Did you guys think out a single part of the story? And here's the sad part. Despite what most people think, it's not beyond salvaging. Off the top of my head, in another ploy to steal the formula, Plankton tricks SpongeBob into thinking that Krabby Patties are people too, and he tries to engage in a friendship with one. No, instead they opt for a creepy romance that doesn't make any sense in any way, shape, or form. So, SpongeBob goes into the Krusty Krab and starts talking about his girlfriend. You know, this scene would probably be funny if the writers remembered that Squidward knew who SpongeBob's girlfriend actually was. We might have gotten some witty dialogue going on. Once again, SpongeBob is taking a Krabby Patty to a place where they eat Krabby Patties. Tell me again, when did he forget that Patty was a Krabby Patty? Is that a scene on an extended DVD somewhere? If he did, this episode would make sense. But there was no reason for SpongeBob to think that this particular Krabby Patty was anything special. He made it well. Yeah, he makes them all well. That's kind of his shtick. For some reason, Mr. Krabs humors SpongeBob. Anything for money, I guess. And Squidward shows us the Nasty Patty. Remember from the episode Nasty Patty, where SpongeBob knew what a fucking Krabby Patty was?
She's the most gorgeous creature in the sea.
God, and I thought Squidward was pretentious about his art. SpongeBob smells the Krabby Patty and wakes up from his delusion. Somehow. Yeah, I don't get it.
Boy, there was a time when I was in love too. She was a Krabby Patty that looked a lot like yours does.
No comment.
You know what I mean. She was a firm, juicy, a warm patty.
Is that where you get your secret sauce? Mr. Krabs tells SpongeBob that patties are meant to be eaten, and so he must eat the gross Krabby Patty. I thought bad patties were supposed to be incinerated. Talk about a clusterfuck. Give them one thing, they're really thinking out of the box. But if this episode is a testament to anything, it's that sometimes the box is a good place to be. A lack of transition stops anything from making sense. When you want to do something this surreal, you've got to communicate things a lot better to the audience. SpongeBob thinks that a patty is worth preserving for no particular reason. He gets romantic feelings for it for no particular reason. He gets over it for no particular reason. Even if it made sense, it would still be gross. And not to mention that SpongeBob is out of character in every sense of the word. You guys are gonna see some weird things in the recommended video section, huh? Now, when SpongeBob does something so horrendous, they tend to do it only once. And praise the Lord for that. There's only one Splinter, and there's only one Appel for Gary. However, there is one area they don't relent ever, and that's turning the entire universe against Squidward. There are two reasons that I'm doing this as a list. Number one is that it's going to get really old if I do a dozen different reviews about episodes that are all bad in the exact same way. You can only say that putting Squidward at the ass of your jokes doesn't automatically make them funny in so many ways. The other reason is that they've done this so many times, this is the only way I could put it into perspective. Let me put it this way. I am reviewing the 10 worst episodes of the exact same basic premise. I've disqualified Squid Baby and Squid's Visit, and there are about 7 others that I've considered for this list but didn't piss me off enough to include. That is 19 episodes where the basic plot is that we're treated to Squidward's pain and agony because the writers think it's funny. I mean, it had to have worked at some point, right? It was funny once upon a time and gave us episodes like Squid's Day Off, Opposite Day, or Club SpongeBob. So what happened? What makes it funny in those episodes and not in Squid Baby or Squid's Visit? Okay, that answer's pretty obvious. The former aren't as creepy as fuck or put their target ridicule in a diaper. But if it was a common and accepted plot thread, how did it get so terrible? Well, I know the answer to that already, but for the sake of humor, let's say I don't and find out why. You know the funny thing about doing lists like this? When you do it as honestly as possible and analyze your choices, you rarely get what you would expect. When I started this list, this episode was originally like number 4, but through a combination of reevaluation and watching some new episodes for the first time, it got knocked back by some stiff competition. So let's talk about boat smarts. First of all, let's knock out the elephant in the room. Some may be tempted to call this a ripoff of the Krusty Krab training video. I don't agree. This is more of a certain style, similar to Family Guy's Road 2 series. That being said, that is the only defense I can muster for this shitty excuse for an episode. This episode tries to show us the difference between a driver with boat smarts and a driver without boat smarts. A driver with boat smarts gets maimed, tortured, and beaten for doing the right thing, while a driver who doesn't goes through the whole episode unscathed. Now in a pre-movie episode, Squidward would have gotten torment because he would be too arrogant to think he needs to follow proper safety procedures. In these modern episodes, he suffers torment because he's Squidward, and for no other reason whatsoever. Now, there are two particular reasons that I thought this episode would be higher on the list. The first reason is that Squidward is getting punished for proper safety precautions. You know, like wearing his seatbelt.
Well, at least he had his seatbelt on.
Yeah, I'm not going on the whole agenda that SpongeBob is trying to teach things like the fun of unemployment, and it normally gets a pass from me on stuff like that. But this episode is trying to present itself as, you know, educational. If it's parody, do it right! The other reason is that fucking stinger at the end.
Looks like you guys forgot your boat smarts!
That line there, said by someone with no boat smarts to two people with boat smarts, guaranteed it a spot on this list. I mean, that is just one of the most infuriating lines an episode could end on. Okay, not the most infuriating, but it's gotta be up there. Alright, let's get this out of the way.
Ow! Okay, it's on my foot.
Okay.
Yeah, that one moment single-handedly brought this episode into infamy, and it places on most people's worst list even higher than the Splinter, which I really personally don't understand. I guess you could make the case that the toenail scene is more relatable than the Splinter, and the Splinter is technically cartoonish and over the top, but I'd rather have like 10 seconds than an entire episode based around pain, gross out, and misery. What's surprising to me is that Jean Charmot's, this fucker, had absolutely nothing to do with this episode. It looks like more than one person on the writing staff has got some serious gore fascination going on here. I pretty much already talked about his gore as much as I could in that review, and I keep calling House Fancy the reverse The Splinter. The Splinter is an episode that's loaded with gross out and shoehorns in some Squidward torture porn. House Fancy is an episode loaded with Squidward torture porn that's got gross out shoehorned in. They do have one thing in common though. If you don't care about gross out, both of these episodes are fucking boring. I mean, it's not as boring as The Play's The Thing, which was one of the candidates for this list, but it's up there. Excellent! Squilliam's got a great house filled with all kinds of riches. If I cared, I'd be watching people make sim houses on YouTube. I mean, there's one point where Squilliam shows the host a gilded doorknob, and he acts like he's got a fetish about the thing, and when Squilliam shows him a ton, he acts like he doesn't fucking care. SpongeBob enters the plot because he flat out admits that he was spying on Squidward, and for the majority of the episode, nothing happens. If it wasn't for that fucking toenail scene, then no one would ever bring this episode up. Part of me thinks that that's kind of why the writers did it, but for the most part, there's nothing really to talk about here. Why isn't it higher on the list? Well, for one, Squidward actually won in the end. The only other torture porn where Squidward won that I can think of is Keep Bikini Bottom Beautiful, but that one didn't have a toenail scene being brutally ripped off, so it was at a disadvantage. And that's the other reason that House Fancy isn't higher. It had some stiff competition of worse writing, more annoyance, and more torment to Squidward. Do you want to know exactly where SpongeBob went wrong? Like, the exact day? May 20th, 2005. The day that Good Neighbors aired. A plot revolving around Patrick and SpongeBob annoying Squidward wasn't anything new, but at the time, this was the worst possible way they could have done it. Issue number 1. Squidward wasn't being an ass or arrogant or anything at the beginning of the episode. He was just trying to enjoy his Sunday, the only day of the week he had off, which is weird because the whole earlier episode revolved around Squidward lamenting the fact that he didn't get Sundays off. Yeah, even as a kid, I noticed problems about this episode. The episode goes on and on with Patrick and SpongeBob annoying Squidward and eating up his Sunday. The biggest problem with this episode is how incredibly stupid they are. They only finally realize that they made some kind of whoopsie when Squidward yells at them and finally manages to break through their thick skulls. You guys might want to savor this because as far as I can tell, this was the last time that anyone ever managed to break through their stupidity. And it only barely works. And that's only because it's in service to the plot. Squidward gets a security system, but because SpongeBob and Patrick are coming in to apologize, the security system doesn't see them as a threat, because that's exactly how security systems work. Then the episode loses all logic as the security system kicks Squidward out of his house as it goes on a rampage to destroy Bikini Bottom. I don't know why it goes on to destroy Bikini Bottom. Does it make any logical sense? No. Is it necessary to the plot? Not really. Is it even remotely funny? Not in the slightest. Then the episode ends with Squidward getting a summon to clean up Bikini Bottom for every Sunday for the rest of his life. So the episode comes off as Squidward getting punished for not taking it in the ass when SpongeBob and Patrick want to torment him. It makes you wonder why he doesn't get a restraining order against them. Well, you ever wonder why Squidward doesn't take legal actions against SpongeBob? Well, he did. Once. In a terrible, terrible episode. My last 3 choices were all interchangeably bad, and I could have put them in any order. So now we're getting into the episodes that enrage me. In fact, I'm really surprised that this particular episode doesn't get more hate. Granted, I hadn't seen it myself before I started making this list, but I'm sure someone somewhere else has to have seen it and seen how horrible it truly is. It seems to start like a typical SpongeBob annoys Squidward plot, until they get to the Krusty Krab. What follows is one of the most uncomfortable sequences I've ever seen in the show. Dead fucking serious. In most of these episodes, the writers don't know they're going too far because they're incompetent as all hell. Here, they are intentionally trying to go too far with Squidward's torment, and it quickly becomes hard to watch. In fact, it seems like they stuffed everything wrong with modern SpongeBob into a 1-minute long window. Squidward torture, SpongeBob making things worse through stupidity, and Mr. Krabs caring about money more than life. At the end, Squidward snaps. The next day, he gives SpongeBob his own restraining order. If SpongeBob violates it, he will go to jail. Now here's the main problem with the episode. SpongeBob is close to his original personality, making Squidward seem like the bad guy for trying to keep SpongeBob away from him. If there's anywhere he should be back to normal, it shouldn't be here. So there's no SpongeBob to torment Squidward. What are our clever, sadistic writers to do? Use Patrick! If I ever make another list like this, it's going to be the top 10 worst Patrick's a Prick episodes, because that's the other overused way of being terrible on the show. And yeah, they double dip a few times. The rest of the episode goes on to have Patrick annoy Squidward, and by extension the audience. And the question arises of why the fuck Squidward doesn't get another restraining order. And the way that Squidward gets tormented are, let's call them forced.
Grammy, I brought your favorite, seaberry pie.
And Squidward is allergic to that pie for this one moment only. Since he's got bumps on his face, Patrick thinks that Squidward is a monster who is after SpongeBob and attacks him. SpongeBob violates his restraining order to break them up. Then Squidward replaces SpongeBob's name on the restraining order with Patrick's. Patrick starts laughing hysterically, and the episode just stops. Yeah, that's how it ends. It's never mentioned if Patrick was under a restraining order in any other episode. Guys, you gotta end the stories you're trying to tell. I mean, is that too much to ask for? Hey, do you guys want to see a worse version of House Fancy? No? Well, too bad, because they made one! Presenting Pineapple Fever. No, seriously, it recycles the episode point for point. Like, out of nowhere gore for having the sake of out of nowhere gore! Yeah, I assume that no one talks about probably one of the most gruesome moments of the show because House Fancy did take all of its thunder. Most Squidward torture porns have the entire plot revolve around him. You know, it shows us a day in the life of Squidward. This episode shoehorns him in solely to torture him. I'm completely serious. After a weather report says a storm is coming, Patrick and SpongeBob begin doing a bunch of construction, because that's what you do during a thunderstorm. This gets Squidward to rip his eyebrow off and angrily storms over to SpongeBob's house, in which the aforementioned storm stops him from walking 5 yards without getting drenched by undersea rain and zapped by undersea lightning. I hear that that's a real problem off the coast of New Zealand. So Squidward is forced to tolerate SpongeBob and Patrick's stupidity.
Squidward, the lights went off.
Yes, they did. When you turn them off.
Why was that line even necessary? At a later point, we see that the house gets zapped by lightning. That'd be an excellent excuse to have the power go out. This is another episode where the majority of the plot is spent on nothing happening. And if you haven't guessed by now, that's an aspect of modern SpongeBob that I don't fucking like. If you're not going to do anything with the plot, at least try to be funny. Then after being trapped in a storm for a couple of hours, all three of them go insane. Yeah, they go batshit crazy, completely unprompted and out of nowhere. I mean, I could believe it if they were trapped in SpongeBob's house for like a week, but as far as I can tell, they've only been in there for one afternoon. And considering that anything goes with SpongeBob and Patrick, I can believe that they're just playing crazy. But I highly doubt that being denied one single meal would drive Squidward to insanity. The storm ends, and Squidward runs outside of the house, only to find that it's on top of a tornado for some inexplicable reason. And for some inexplicable reason, we're only halfway through the list. My god, this list is going to kill me. Now we're getting into the real shit. We're now into the stuff that comes to most people's mind when they think of Squidward torture porns. And to start it off, let's go with Cephalopod Lodge. Jesus fucking Christ, where do I begin? Let's start with the fact that the episode begins with Squidward happy.
What is it about the third Wednesday of every month that makes Squidward so happy?
Why the fuck do you care? Even if it's an anomaly, why don't you just mind your own fucking business and let him be happy? A trenchcoat walks in and tells Squidward that tonight is the big night. And so SpongeBob and Patrick, for some reason, decide to follow Squidward to his secret place. Why? I have no fucking clue. The episode forgot to establish it. So immediately, our supposed protagonists are pretty much stalkers butting into someone's business that they shouldn't even be remotely interested in. And they follow him to a pyramid in the middle of nowhere. Squidward meets up with a door guard and is led inside the building. You guys want to remember him for me, please? We see that it's a large gathering of cephalopods, and some strange ritual begins. There's apparently an initiation ritual, where the new recruit is stung by a moray eel, which is apparently their arch nemesis. You know what? I'm done questioning their marine biology skills. If they want to say a cat can breathe underwater, fine. I don't fucking care anymore. I'll stop questioning it if it means we can move on faster. SpongeBob and Patrick have somehow materialized past the door guard and start cheering on. Squidward accidentally reveals that he knows them, and that he led them to the lodge, and he gets kicked out. Yeah, Squidward may have led them there, but don't you guys have security? Like, I don't know, a door guard which requires a secret handshake? It might be a good idea to have one of those around. Just saying. Patrick and SpongeBob try to say it wasn't Squidward's fault that they got into the lodge.
It wasn't your fault, and it wasn't Squidward's fault. Whose fault was it?
Maybe it's your fault.
You know, seeing how you're the door guard, that's a distinct possibility. Then the rest of the episode shamelessly rips off Good Neighbors, and like Pineapple Fever above, just does everything 10 times worse. Squidward is continually put into physical pain and embarrassment, and like I said earlier, it's riding on the heels of SpongeBob and Patrick stalking Squidward for something they shouldn't remotely care about. Eventually, Patrick and SpongeBob get dressed in a giant sock, because apparently it looks like a moray eel. Just roll with it, it'll be over faster. It almost gets him back into the lodge, but Patrick and SpongeBob give him up again, and the episode ends on one of the worst notes of this entire list.
But you'll have to pass the initiation again.
Remember earlier when I said that I could also make a list of the worst Patrick's a Prick episodes? If I did, Smooth Jazz at Bikini Bottom would rank pretty fucking high on that list. You see, most Patrick's a Prick episodes have the courtesy of at least explaining why he's in the plot. We don't get that here. Apparently, Squidward has tickets to Kelby G's concert. It's weird how often he and his music ends up in Squidward torture porns. Anyway, Squidward refuses to let SpongeBob see his ticket out of fear that it'll be destroyed. So, out of nowhere, Patrick eats it. With no second thoughts. Or first thoughts for that matter. Or anything other than a manner of destroying the ticket. Luckily, there's still one way to get the tickets, and some backstage passes to boot, by being the lucky caller on a radio station. And it turns out that SpongeBob is that lucky caller. So the two of them get to go to Kelby G's concert, but SpongeBob isn't exactly that type of person. We get hit with a few minutes of boring filler before the concert actually begins. Then Patrick appears out of nowhere asking for ketchup for his nachos. Alright, how the fuck did he get in? It was clearly established that people needed tickets to get into that concert. Are you trying to say that Patrick... Oh, God! Oh, fucking God, no! Why the fuck would you put that image in my brain? Oh, wait. Even that doesn't make any sense because of this line here.
You're probably not gonna get that back before showtime.
All it would have taken is Patrick mentioning that he had a ticket of his own when he fucking ate Squidward's for no fucking reason. Then Patrick eats Squidward's backstage pass. And then he eats SpongeBob's backstage pass. I'm a little bit rusty on the basics of comedy, so someone's gonna have to tell me how in any way is seeing someone in a constant state of misery funny? This is a serious question, by the way. The answer is that it's funny if that character is an unlikable asshole. We like to feel a sense of catharsis or justice. Back before the movie, Squidward was an arrogant asshole. He deserved consequences in episodes like Naughty Nautical Neighbors. I think the writers believe that his assholeness carries over to other episodes, but unfortunately for them, it doesn't fucking work that way. Even if it did, they've gone above and beyond with his torment. In this episode, all Squidward wanted to do was see a concert. He wasn't rubbing it in anyone's face, and he wasn't being a jerk. And then Patrick gets up on stage where the bodyguards promptly beat the tar out of him. Oh, that's what would happen if this episode had any semblance of logic. No, instead he's allowed to use the microphone and make a restaurant order. And this guy, who is stupid enough to think that a jazz concert is a fast food place, is smart enough to dodge bodyguards, which have finally come out. Took them long enough, and the patrons seem pretty happy with the guy who just ruined their concert and start carrying him away. Squidward tries to get back the backstage passes from Patrick. They get stopped by a guard and are told to go back to their seat, where someone is taking them both. Correct me if I'm wrong, but don't concert tickets entitle you to certain seats? I mean, the two of them won front row seats earlier. That's what the guard just now was for, right? Writers, that brain of yours is getting a little old and dying. It needs exercise or it's going to vanish completely and you will die in your own excretion. I am telling you this for your own good because it'll be a happy day from you when that finally happens. So Kelby G, who ignored Patrick, throws SpongeBob and Squidward out of the building. And somehow Patrick got backstage because, well, this is a Patrick's a Prick episode. And once again, how the hell did he... You know what? Never mind. We are not going back there. SpongeBob and Squidward run into a suit, and the episode actually gets Squidward to beg. It took them 8 seasons, but they finally got him to do it. Is this what you guys wanted? Or did you just want him to hang himself? What else would they be doing this shit for? SpongeBob plays his ukulele, Kelpie sees him, and signs him to the act. 3 episodes to go, and I want to fucking kill myself. Yep, Boating Buddies. The most infamous Squidward torture porn is only number 3 on this list. When I started making this list, everyone thought this would be my number 1. Hell, even I thought that this would be my number 1. But doing my research, watching these episodes again and again, I found that I hate not 1, but 2 Squidward torture porns more than this fucking episode. It's not like I don't hate this episode, though. And it's not like I don't know why people hate this episode. Remember when I said that Squid's Visit wasn't the creepiest episode of the show? That's because, to me, this episode is. Because this episode is creepy. It's intensely creepy. It's unwatchably creepy. Let's start with the fact that SpongeBob decides to annoy Squidward because he was just breathing. When Squidward decides to go away to ignore him, SpongeBob decides to chase him down. Why? Because Squidward left his car keys behind. Yeah, Squidward has a car in this episode, which gets him to run through a stop sign, which forces him to spend a day in hell. Yeah, Squidward has to go to boating school. Fan-fucking-tastic.
I have impeccable boat smarts.
Don't fucking remind me. And as you might imagine, SpongeBob is there. Now here's an interesting fact. For this entire episode, Mrs. Puff seems to have forgotten how horrible that SpongeBob is.
He is the bane of my existence.
Yours too?
What I meant is that she doesn't seem to fucking care. And then we get into the creepy aspect. SpongeBob seems to have a rather unsettling attraction to Squidward that constantly surfaces throughout the entire episode. When the episode isn't focusing on the stalker with a crush, it's focused on giving Squidward beating after beating. And what was Squidward's crime in this episode? Trying to get away from SpongeBob. For doing that, he's forced to be stuck with SpongeBob. For getting pissed about it, he ends up getting beaten up. For no fucking reason, Mrs. Puff forces Squidward to drive with SpongeBob, despite knowing how dangerous SpongeBob is, knowing that Squidward also hates SpongeBob, and never having partners drive in any other episode ever. This leads to a random shrink ray incident that ends up with Squidward being beaten up and ending up in a body cast. Because he's in a body cast, he ends up failing the test, which any normal teacher, or Mrs. Puff in any other episode, would allow him to take when he's not injured. And so he gets sentenced to another week in boating school. The worst part of this episode is obviously the ending, where after being righteously pissed, Squidward yells at SpongeBob, and circumstances forces him to call SpongeBob his boating buddy, and Squidward fails anyway. Which means next week the same shit will happen, but even worse. So yeah, boating buddies is heinously bad. The only question is what could possibly top it. So what outright shoots Choir Boys into the top two? Two words: malicious intent. In most of the previous episodes, SpongeBob tormented Squidward through accidents or complete stupidity. So take one of those episodes and have SpongeBob actively attempt to annoy Squidward, take his dreams away, and hurt him. Don't believe me? Well, the episode starts with Squidward practicing singing in the shower when he passes by his toilet.
Don't feel bad. He didn't use me yesterday either.
Are you suggesting that Squidward doesn't— Oh God! What the fuck is with these episodes and their suggestions of shit? Outside, Squidward passes by SpongeBob and smiles because he's feeling down. Remember this because apparently this is the most heinous crime that one could possibly commit. It's used to give justification for SpongeBob trying to nag Squidward, chase him down, dig a giant pothole to quote-unquote get Squidward's attention, which forces him to be surrounded by jellyfish. Stuck in the jellyfish, SpongeBob.
Now I have a captive audience.
It's like that one line is all that I needed to see each and every one of these torture porns as purposeful on SpongeBob's behalf. It continues to sing as Squidward gets repeatedly zapped. How is this funny? Just because Squidward is at the ass of your jokes does not automatically make them funny.
Squidward, could you keep it down, please? I'm trying to find my starting pitch here.
Go die in a hole along with anyone who made up this trite. Surprisingly, Zeus Service and Casey Alexander aren't behind most of these Squidward torture porns. They're only behind 2 of them so far. Now the guys you want to blame are Aaron Springer and Richard Purcell. At least one of them has written for every episode on this list with the exception of Restraining SpongeBob, but that episode had Paul Tippett, the head honcho himself. So at least one of those guys seems to have a very real vendetta against Squidward. Let's deal with Richard Purcell first. He was a writer on Ren and Stimpy's adult party cartoon. Moving on. Aaron Springer is a different beast altogether. Most people know that he wrote on SpongeBob back when it was good, working on episodes like Band Geeks. Do you know what else this guy did? No, seriously, take a guess. You'll never get it. This guy wrote for Samurai Jack. 3 of his episodes were on my top 10 list. There's Losing Your Touch, and then there's Going Fucking Insane. Jesus fucking Christ, that's disgusting. One reason this episode is so high on the list is that we're constantly given terrible singing and annoying throat clearing all the way through. Needless to say, it grates on you. Yeah, this is the only episode on the list that's unlistenable on top of unwatchable. Also, SpongeBob suddenly gets the ability to sing greatly and upstages Squidward at the men's chorus. So yeah, we have an episode where Squidward does next to nothing wrong, SpongeBob continually torments him to a severe degree and does it knowingly, and SpongeBob wins in the end. What could possibly be worse?
Person man, hit on the head with a frying pan, lives his life.
Now, I don't think a lot of people will agree with me here, because when it comes to worst SpongeBob episodes, I always give a more abstract answer. I seem to hate more what each episode represents, rather than its overall production. So bear with me as I present my number 1, which is probably an episode you most likely don't care about. Presenting A Breath of Fresh Squidward. Most of you are probably thinking that it does belong on the list just further down, and definitely not number 1. Well, let me try to explain why I hate this episode so much. The episode starts with SpongeBob and Patrick watching Squidward sleep. Apparently a favorite pastime of theirs is watching the sunrise in Squidward's bedroom. And then we see a book of all of the main holidays, while it looks like Squidward is about to have an aneurysm.
Do you remember what I told you happens to my brain every time I see you?
Whenever Squidward sees us, the storm clouds in his brain roll in and a nasty storm rages. Squidward's happy gland is forced to take shelter in the recesses of his mind.
As far as I can tell, they believe this story. Yeah, I'm calling this episode the worst Squidward torture porn, taking every one of those other ones into account. This time, Squidward tries to use an electric fence to keep SpongeBob and Patrick out. And of course, the two of them think they're invited to a fence warming party. So Squidward catapults them away and turns on the fence. Considering Squidward's experience with home security, we all know that this isn't going to work for a second. Yeah, somehow they get catapulted back into Squidward's fence. He angrily touches the security gate, which gets himself electrocuted. SpongeBob and Patrick are totally unaware that Squidward is being electrocuted in front of them, despite being repeatedly stung and shocked by electric jellyfish. The electroshock switches Squidward's personality entirely. He wants to go to the petting zoo with SpongeBob and Patrick, so Squidward is actually happy. Even SpongeBob sees that Squidward is happier, and he says that with a smile. Remember that. Things get interesting when Squidward sneaks into SpongeBob's house. Why SpongeBob didn't sneak into Squidward's house that morning, I have no idea. But as you can see, this episode is giving SpongeBob a taste of his own medicine. Like most episodes that end up at the top of my worst lists, they do something right. SpongeBob has to deal with his own SpongeBob, and let me just say that after everything I've seen, it's really fucking cathartic.
Mr. Smiley Face Krabby Patty, no one can come between us.
I know this doesn't have anything to do with anything, but this episode's sister episode is To Love a Patty. Now here's what really sticks it for me. Squidward is acting like SpongeBob. You know, the fucking annoying one that sneaks into Squidward's house. And the episode itself sees him as an antagonist. Every time Squidward tries to do something that SpongeBob usually does, he's treated like a creep. So yeah, the writers, or the entire universe, is a hypocrite. Good to know.
You know, he might be as good a fry cook as you.
You know, I'd be more sympathetic with SpongeBob here if the episode didn't begin with him admitting that he breaks into Squidward's house and watches him sleep every single morning. Not to mention all the other fucking stuff I've seen. Okay, I normally don't criticize animation errors, but how the hell do you miss the grills in the background? So it turns out that Squidward is a better SpongeBob than SpongeBob, and ends up becoming the new Employee of the Month. Once again, after all the shit I've seen, it's extremely cathartic. And like I said, this episode keeps expecting me to feel sorry for what's happening to SpongeBob, which is not going to happen. SpongeBob, you deserve a SpongeBob of your own. Even the SpongeBob we get in this episode deserves his own SpongeBob. Hey SpongeBob, can I please get a side of fries with those tears? On second thought, they're delicious enough by themselves. Oh sorry, do I sound like an asshole? Did you notice everything that I saw this creature do? Then there's a party at Patrick's house, and SpongeBob is still crying. Seriously dude, you lost an award. Get over yourself.
How's the cake, SpongeBob?
See SpongeBob? He's not being an asshole. He's asking these questions in earnest. See how it fucking feels? And Pogo dancing with Patrick seems to be SpongeBob's final straw. He snaps and basically becomes a whiny spoiled brat, and kicks Squidward out of his own party, in someone else's house, and everyone else continues the party. This forces Squidward to cry, which I actually do feel sorry for, which causes him to electrocute himself. You know, despite the fence blowing a gasket earlier. Like I said, it's not so much that this episode has the most torment given to Squidward, or even that it's the worst put together. It's that the episode expects me to buy the SpongeBob that I've dealt with in Boating Buddies, in Choir Boys, in Cephalopod Lodge, in Good Neighbors as the good guy, and the Squidward in those very episodes as the bad guy. Let's just say that that's perhaps the most insulting thing that a writer can try and do. If SpongeBob learned that being an annoying menace that makes Squidward want to slit his wrists and hang himself in this episode, then it would probably be decent. Hell, it might even be great. But it's that little touch that slides it right into the worst of the worst.